Yeah, no problem.
All right, we are ready, Mayor.
All right.
President. President Source,
Present.
Vice President Borgensa,
Present.
Secretary Matula,
Present.
Trustee James,
Present.
Trustee Matias,
Present.
Trustee Lady Q,
Present.
Trustee Gordon.
Present.
Let it be known for the record that Trustee Gomez is excused.
All right, thank you very much. And I'll now ask everyone to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, all right.
Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. That's gonna bring us to item 3, which is approval of the agenda. And we do have a suggestion to move, we have some individuals here that would like to speak in community forum, which is normally at the end of the agenda. And we have a request to move that up. So we would move the community forum up next, right before the consent calendar. If everybody's all right with that, are there any other requests for changes to the agenda? All right, seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? All right. With that, we will move to community forum. And we've got a few speakers I know that want to join us. If you haven't turned in a speaker card, you can flag us, but I believe we have 3. We have Mr. Darling here that have requested to speak. We can have you go first if you'd like. Yeah, we can go.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
So they have to forgive me for this boardroom. I'm used to you guys being in the city council chambers. Peter, nice to see you. Is this where I belong?
Wherever you want.
Yeah, that's.
Wherever I want.
You're,
All right.
you're a trailblazer. You're the first one.
Thank you. My name is Doug Darling. I live in Suisun City. I actually live on Grizzly Island for the last 6 months. I'll be there the next 5 years. The 6 years before that, I lived in Martinez, California. 25 years before that, I was a Vallejo resident. I am a staunch watershed advocate, okay? I'm here tonight on behalf of the Vallejo Watershed Alliance for 3 reasons. 1, to give my thanks to the support that the Alliance receives from this district. 2, we have a July 19th, a 20th anniversary barbecue. 3, just in case you would like to have a presentation that Rochelle has kindly provided for us to teach you about the who, what, where, whens, and why of the Vallejo Watershed Alliance. Who are we and whatnot? Having said that, I typically come every year to the wastewater district and give my thanks and for your support, because I've been involved with the VWA for over 20 years. I'm actually the person kind of behind the development of that, but that's okay. And it's the Vallejo Watershed Alliance is not something that a couple of community members can pull off. It's a collaboration. Is there a timer up here somewhere?
You know, we don't have that set up, I believe, so
Well,
go
thank
ahead
you.
and if you
Then
exceed.
I'm sure you won't hold me to 3
This is
minutes.
the
Thank you.
timer, and if it gets excessive, I'll cut you off, but take your time.
All right, well, having said that, there's an amazing collaboration that makes the Vallejo Watershed Alliance what it is. And this district is one of those partners, so to speak. 2, July 19th at Blue Rock Springs Park is our 20th anniversary barbecue. We always do barbecue. This one's a little different. We got better food. Shelley Lockmiller will be our chef. Mark Walter will be there helping her with that matter. So I'm here to give you a personal invitation to please join us. I mean, I see a lot of new faces here. I recognize, well, Eddie, maybe Tom, yes, I know. Peter, yeah, but anyway.
We just gotta
We invite you to join us, okay? 3, if you would like to get a presentation on cooking, I know a lot of you may not know who is the VWA and why is it, but you guys have been behind this for 20 years. And I think it's an amazing organization because of the partnership we have. We're probably the only environmental organization in the city of Vallejo that I know of, but that's okay. But it's the partnership that makes us what we are. So that's why I'm here tonight, to thank you, as I always do, for your support and what we bring to this community, not just cleaning up our watershed, but beautification, so to speak. Okay, so I understand there's no questions or answers tonight. That's why I encourage you to.
Apparently there's 3 questions. I don't know if that's what we
You're
want
not
to do.
encouraging the title like the.
Oh, the time. Yeah.
Okay,
The time of barbecue.
I believe it's the
Yeah.
question that everybody has. What time?
What time? And how can I reach out to someone beforehand?
Rochelle
I can send
is
you
Okay.
a save the date.
Okay, thank
Thank
What
you.
time on the 19th, just for the record?
9 to 12.
There it is.
Yeah.
9 to 12.
Thank you very
including
much.
Cleanup, but the actual barbecue is actually around 11:30.
All right, thank you.
When you come earlier, we'll put you to work, don't worry.
All right, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll ask Eddie to call up. I think we have a couple, at least 2 more speakers. If that's
We
okay.
do, President, the next person is Terry Saltz.
All right, Mr. Sachs.
All right, great. I'm afraid it won't be as dynamic and fun as the last speaker.
It's been
Um,
good. We now
but
do
I'll-
have a timer.
Yeah, it's gonna be great, it's already
Yeah.
started.
Yeah, so, you know.
Okay, I'm Terry Saltz, resident and commercial property owner in downtown. I'm here to give you the straight poop on the stink in Vallejo. So I've reported that out to you guys before on our observations on the smells. We believe that it's related to the covers. There's some efforts on the district side that's gonna reduce those odors and reduce those incidents. But we are keeping a log, and I just want to report to you that there was, and I didn't send this to you, I apologize for that. But there's 27 incidents in April. So this is the monthly logs, I don't have anything for May. I will say that we have gone through a period of light smells since the winter. But we anticipate as the low pressure start that we're gonna start getting increased smells, and I know there's maintenance that's gonna be happening soon that's gonna increase some of the smells. And that there's efforts going along with odor control, but we're gonna continue to be diligent and continue this log. We've created a website. It's called PETA.org. Anybody can go to it and they can log in and they can report any kind of instance, smell and odor instance at PETA.org. That's PIITA.org. And PETA stands for Poop is in the Air. And this log, I hope to have right now, it's just you can report and you can see where the incidents have been. We hope to have a filter it to 30 days, 10 days, 6 months, and also be able to report out actually a listed report like this, so anybody could pull this off that website. I do want to commend the district for the odor control measures that you report out in April. I read your report. I'd like to see those going forward. As we stated before, we're concerned with the covers not being in sight, but we want to give you guys the time to make good on your efforts to do that. So we'll be patient, but we'll be diligent on tracking the odors. So usually we see about 11 to 14 reports on this, but it's grown to 27. We have more people reporting, and it seems like if we were to identify the footprint, I call it the odor footprint, like when the first cover was removed and the odor footprint was impacting a greater area up Solano. And then when the second cover was removed, it actually grew to like Amador and Georgia. I think we're seeing more activity in that first footprint right now. We're not really seeing it on Georgia Street or on Amador right now. That's what this report shows. I do have a couple suggestions and recommendations for the trustees. Where are those?
We have which time, President?
Oh, well, here are my suggestions.
If you can do them at just a
Real
Your
quick,
digest
real quick,
sentence.
I think there should be odor and complaints, agenda, a permanent agenda item on your agenda where you can review, orders and complaints. And I think there should be a report out on any citations that the district is having. I don't know if that already happens.
Yeah.
I don't see it, but I think there should be a regular report out on citations and so that it's all transparent.
Thank you. We
Okay.
appreciate the work, yeah, that work.
All right, thank you.
And I think when we get to the general manager's update, we can get an update on the odor, because I know there were some repairs in progress and that the tops are actually not the problem. There's a different odor control system, but we can go over that
Yeah,
one, which is
I'll
report.
learn more about that.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you.
Super.
Yes, President, the next person is David McCandles.
All right.
I'm also here to complain about the odors. I have a property really close to here and I don't think it's improved at all. And also I noticed the misters aren't working on the bio towers and that's been like at least a month and a half, probably 2 months that those haven't been working. I personally don't think they are effective, but now they're not working at all. So the mist isn't on. I'd like to know why that is. And just here to complain. Frustrated.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Thank
Sue,
you.
what did you say your name once again? Sorry.
My name?
Yes,
David McCandless.
thank you, David.
All right.
Next person speaker we have, person is, excuse if I mispronounce it, Saminet Rivas.
Hi, so my name is Samina Rivas, and I'm here on behalf of the Citizen Air Monitoring Network. So I guess I'm also here regarding the odor issue. I've been following this issue since about December of 2023. And I have my own personal logs, and I've logged about 30 different times. That's by no means a complete record, because I'm only limited by the opportunity that I can actually observe it, and I work out of town. But this is like really kind of serious everyday kind of issue. So as part of the Citizen Air Monitoring Network, I took on like a community role in investigating this project, or this issue. And I also wanted to share that as part of the statewide mobile monitoring initiative that is coming to Vallejo, we are going to be, or as part of that campaign, we reached out to, I don't know, like probably several thousand people, and we got an overwhelming response of complaints for the odor issue. So if you think about it from a marketing perspective, maybe for all of the people that are experiencing the issue, you might get like a 2% return of complaints on that. So with that overwhelming amount of response and concern, I think it's really important that the people in this room are made aware of how serious that issue is. So I guess in addition to that, like the statewide mobile monitoring initiative, they'll be driving a lot of like vehicles with emission equipment integrated in the vehicles, and they are definitely going to concentrate on this area, and there will be data that can hopefully back up the lived experiences of the residents here. That's it.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Do we have any other speakers?
In the corners,
Last call. Anyone else? So normally our community forum is bookended with the general manager's report and the trustees report. I don't know, General Manager Thompson, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you want to share any updates about the
Yeah.
odor,
Happy to.
just in a timely manner?
No,
with our
happy to,
speakers?
as long as we're there.
Yeah,
So on the consent calendar, we have, it's section K, and it talks about the odor. So we're asked to put on every month to report on odors and what we're doing on a monthly basis. And what we actually also have on the consent calendar is the award of the secondary odor control equipment with GSW, the construction project. So that was the phase with the covers coming off the trickling filters. So this is going to be the secondary odor control equipment that's going to solve that. And Tracy and engineering's done a great job to get that rolling. Our consultant really worked on it hard, so we got it out, got a bid, and ready to award. So that is on the consent calendar to award. And so that'll hopefully be done by July, August. And so hopefully we will see that difference. The thought is that will solve the problem of those covers coming off, and you should see a big difference there. Other things that we're doing is we met with a system to basically have these odor control sensors, and we walked the site, and they're gonna set them up over kind of all around and kind of get an idea of what the odors are coming out of the plant, so we can better track them and understand them. So it's great that we're getting the data from the citizens as well, but we can collaborate that data with the stuff that we're getting to see where it's coming from to better understand it. And with that, we can do a better job of trying to make sure we're getting the odors that are occurring and when they're occurring. The last thing is which we talked about before, is adding sodium hypochlorite to headworks. And so with the earth shifting over time, the sodium hypochlorite line got moved. So we have a contract with Myers Construction who's doing everything here. They got, taken away doing that emergency work, so they're working on that, but that is their next project, is to try to get that line in. And I don't have an exact date, Natalie, I'm not sure when they're doing it, it's like a month or two. We're trying to get that one in, and that'll feed odor control, basically the headworks where a lot of your odors are coming in, that'll solve the headworks problem. So we have secondary, and we have headworks, and then as we do the monitoring, we continue to get results, we'll attack any other problem that we have. But we'll keep putting it on the monthly report, report on that.
Thank you. And when
Sorry.
oh, yeah, go
I
ahead.
just want to ask, but is there any other mitigation, even if it's other chemicals you can add to the processing, or even if it's cost more money? Because waiting till the end of August to have the smell or the odor issue corrected, it's horrific to live in this area and to have that smell.
It's been over
continues.
5 years.
So can we add, are there chemicals we can add or things that we can do to, even if it increases the cost in order to make sure that it smells
I
good?
mean, possibly. The hard part is that you have to set up a metering system with the tank and everything, and you have to get like the chemical there. So sodium hypochlorite, we are trying to get there at the front. We did add sodium hypochlorite before headworks, so we're adding it there. You could add other chemicals in the system before it gets there. The system on the secondary part, I mean, the misters are working. I'll check on the trickling filters. Last time I was there, it looked like everything was still on. But we can check them. It's not the greatest solution with the wind and everything that happens, but we are trying to figure out exactly, where the odors are coming from. They vary day to day. There's different things that happen when a truck pulls out that creates odors as well. So like just saying, we're not actually sure if you just focus on one part, like secondary, is that going to solve all the complaints? Probably not. So it's really looking at each part, but just solving the secondary problem, I don't think there's anything quick that we can do right away, aside from the misters that we have out there.
And then when we, go ahead.
And are there other jurisdictions doing something similar, or other things that in these similar situations?
Yeah, there's all kinds of odor control equipment that's installed. I mean, the one that we're doing is actually very quick to solve the secondary problem, to change the media filter and hold the odors down through the tripping filters. So that is really our quickest solution to solve that. But yeah, there's a lot of different chemicals you can add throughout the system. The problem is you'll also in the secondary process, you can kill the tripping filters, which is problematic. So you have to kind of weigh it out. So I certainly apologize. I mean, we're not trying to create odors. There's odors at the plant, and we're trying to do it as effectively and quickly as possible. So I certainly apologize for this.
Yeah, thank you. And for, just for continuity, I mean, when the 5 of us came on board in January and we started having the conversation, you had mentioned that the timeline was about this summer. And I think, so it sounds like we're mostly on track. I know there have been, 6 months and then 6 months and then 6 months, but we're actually now to the point where the end is near. But would it be correct to say that it is gonna, now that it's getting hotter and it's coming into the summer, we're probably gonna smell it a little bit worse in the next month or so?
Yeah, I mean, usually,
So that's gonna be misleading probably to make people are gonna think it's getting worse when actually we're hopefully, sounds like just about to the end.
yeah, with different atmospheric conditions trying to create different odors. Like I said, it's varied throughout the plant. As I walk around, there's different parts that I smell at different times. Certainly every time a truck leaves, gets filled up and leaves, you can smell that as it's going by. And there's certain parts of the plant, headworks sometimes smells a little more on some days, and sometimes the secondary smells great.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I'm hoping maybe we can leverage some of the tools and the citizens that are monitoring, if we come up with a way for them to get that information to you all kind of consistently, especially over these next 2 months when it seems like it's probably gonna be not pleasant.
Yeah, and
maybe we can come up with a feedback loop that kind of at least provides more frequent updates to folks as they're dealing with it.
yeah, the data is great, and our director of operations and our operations superintendent, they walk the neighborhoods almost every day, and they take a smell and say, hey, what's happening, and try to figure out what's happening.
Yeah, thank you. We had the same reaction to the lids, by the way, but as a non-engineer, The staff here explained that actually makes it easier to maintain. Having the odor control system that brings everything down, not having the lid makes it easier to maintain and actually leads to less odor overall. So it's counterintuitive to a layperson. But from an engineering standpoint, there's a reason why the lids aren't there.
Yeah, it's just a different way of running the system.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. Did I understand someone saying that you might create a website? I mean, on your website, create like a survey where people can just log on and say, this is what we're experiencing and what time they're smelling it. They can probably help you more accurate.
Right, actually, I mean, the website that Terry's put together is awesome. We do like.
No, so that,
But on the district- on
that
the-
you have it, right?
On the district, yeah, we do get this data. And on the
Okay.
district website, we do have a place that you can log odors. But we do, and we do keep that up to date on any information that's happening. So the report from here as well, gets uploaded every month.
Okay.
And any other information, like as we make progress, we're trying to put the information on the website.
All right,
I just want to make sure I heard you. Thank you.
all right, okay.
So while you collect the data, and I know we're trying to bring in the solution, but as you're collecting the data, what are we really reporting out? I mean, because from a resident perspective, yes, you have this data, but what does that data really mean when it's all said and done for me as a resident and what I am experiencing in the environment, right?
Yeah, and so different types of data. So the data Terry's getting, it's, have a smell, there's something I smell, I try to describe it. As we set up these monitoring systems, we will get accurate, like what's the H2S count, what's the ammonia count. So we'll be able to pinpoint where in the process it's coming from. So then we can backtrack where it's actually coming. So with better data, we'll be able to actually do a better job of figuring out where those odors are coming in and addressing.
All right, go ahead. Trustee Gutierrez.
I just wanna maybe put a finer point to Trustee Letterjuice's comment just now. There's an obvious smell and folks are not hearing like what we're doing as an agency to really address it. And so I don't necessarily know, what resourcing you may have available, both on the community engagement and the PIO public information front, but I just think getting out in front of what our board president has shared and what Trustee Ledger has shared, I think will perhaps ease some of the concern and also probably save your staff some time, because I'm sure those calls are gonna pick up in the next couple of months. So anything you could do to address that would be appreciated.
Sounds good. I mean, we can certainly brainstorm on it and work together to try to figure out a way to better.
Really quickly, and then I want to, since we're technically not on an item right now.
So my concern is, are you taking this data in to make sure it's safe to breathe? Because, this is toxic. Sometimes even, it seems almost inhumane to be breathing that in like that, And so my concern is the safeness of it.
Right. So great question. And I'm trying to think, our director of operations is in here, so I'm going to speak from what I know. I don't know if anybody knows more than I do.
The Citizens Air Monitoring
So
Network, probably, yeah.
But as there's complaints, so it can be, there is an agency that comes in and checks it and does monitoring, and they come to the plant and they take samples. And everyone that's come, as far as I know, there's never been an H2S level that's been harmful to anybody. It's a smell. So H2S has a smell, has a rotten egg smell. But whether it's at a harmful level, as far as I know, they've never come and we've had a violation that it's been, hey, you're exceeding some limits on the odor. And I can find out for sure, but that's.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yes, you can do that for me. I appreciate it.
And I think the bigger, with that, all of this coupled is, again, when we're identifying or someone is giving us data, is really saying, what are we doing? Yes, we're really aware of it even before you said it to us, and this is what we've applied, is really helpful.
Yeah, thank you all, and thanks to our speakers. We were glad to be able to hear you earlier in the meeting. Go ahead, Trustee James.
Do we have the actual timeline? Because I keep hearing the timeline, and I know you said like 5 to 6 months, but where are we at now? Like, what is the timeline throughout the summer? And when will this be, right? Because it does smell if you drive up to the work.
So I mean, Tracy, if you want to tell the timeline for the project.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question. Tonight, we're awarding a contract
for the secondary odor control rehabilitation. So what this system does, it's been offline for a number of years, it's been offline since before I arrived here in 22. So that system pulls the foul air off of the clarifiers, the aeration basin, and the bio towers. It sucks it through the ducting and puts it through a scrubbing system, which we're installing after the contract is awarded. We've actually already purchased the material that we put into the odor control system to accelerate the construction progress. That odor is being stored out of the backyard. So once the contract is approved tonight, we'll go through contracting. The contractor will get all his forms and preparatory work in place, and they'll begin work. The work's anticipated to be completed in July. So that'll be operational system. In addition to that, we're putting in sodium hypochlorite at the headworks, which has been offline due to pipe failures in the delivery system. We've enhanced the delivery mechanisms, and we're gonna reinstitute the sodium hypochlorite in the headworks when the contractor is able to get to it. We don't have a time frame on that, but it should happen within the next couple of months.
How long has it been offline?
I don't know the answer to that. It's not been operational since I've been here, as far as I'm aware, so it's at least 5 years.
Yeah.
We added sodium hypochlorite in the interceptor line as a measure to try to fight the odors very recently. That's been in place, but it hasn't shown to be super effective. The volume of wastewater coming in and the amount we're injecting, it's eaten up by the system, and it's not really effectively reducing the odors that we can tell. The other thing that we're doing is we're putting in a new weather station and odor monitoring stations around the perimeter of the plant. What that's gonna do is it's gonna enable us to actually track both the wind patterns and the weather conditions, and the odor sensors will log what odors are being observed by the stations. And we're gonna establish a baseline so that we can tell, with no odor control in place, what kind of odors are going where, in which direction, according to the winds. And we're gonna chart that, and we can produce a report that if we get a complaint from an address on Amador, we can put in the address, geolocate it, and the system will develop a weather and wind scenario and odor like plume, and it'll be able to tell you if the odor is coming from the plant or from somewhere else that's generating odors. Because it is likely that the odors don't always come from the plant. I'm not saying all of them are coming from the plant, I'm not saying some don't, but it is possible that they're coming from other places too. This system will be able to prove or deny that. So we'll have that in place. We've already contracted with that software as a service, and we're gonna be implementing that within the next couple of months, testing it, getting a baseline, and then it'll be up and running.
Would it be more effective if the president?
I'm a little bit, yeah,
Suggesting moves to consent.
I'm a little bit wary, just as, this is a really important discussion, but we're pushing it with parliamentary procedure here, given that we were supposed to take public comment and move on. So my suggestion might be that we just add an information item at the next meeting, and then we can maybe get into the back and forth a little bit more. And then to the members of the public, you can also feel free to email us in the interim, and we can get additional input and feedback. I'm just trying to stick to, make sure we at least are mostly compliant with our Brown Act and agenda here.
Can I ask for an order?
I don't think we can, I don't think we are, I don't think we can take them from the audience. Yeah, only from board members. So I'm gonna move us, but I will encourage us to continue the conversation, and then we'll add it as an information item next time, and that'll give us a little more leeway to have some conversation. I'm gonna move us to the consent calendar, which is, consists of items 4A through 4M. And we will, first ask if anyone has public comment for consent calendar items. And then if there are none, does anyone on the board have questions or want to remove any items from the consent calendar? And I see trustee Matias.
I want to pull L and M.
Okay, so item L is gonna turn into 4.1. And M is gonna turn into 4.2. And then trustee Letterby pulling E. So item E will become 4.3. And seeing nothing else, do we have a motion to approve the rest of the consent calendar.
Yes, I move that we approve the consent calendar, removing item L and having that become 4.1, item M becoming 4.2, and item E becoming 4.3.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposition or abstentions? In favor? Okay, so that item passes, and with that, with the consent calendar approved, we will move on to the items we pulled, starting with item L, which is now item 4.1, which is receive and file the 2024 performance measurement report, and I will turn it over to trustee Matias, who pulled this item.
You guys all know I'm new here, so I want to better understand why this item is filed on the consent. It's a pretty, it's an annual report that speaks to the district's performance across key areas. There were several items that were concerning to me: financial viability metric, the report out that you guys have on thefts. And so, I feel like this is something that should be either a public hearing item or an administrative item that this board gets to talk about and dialogue with you on. And so my two questions very succinctly are, why is this not part of what would be considered an action item or an administrative item? And then two, is there an opportunity to ask on some of these things that I noticed? Because they tie back to one of the original presentations you gave. And, I find it useful to continue that dialogue across the years.
That'd be great if I could make a suggestion. And because of the time, I'd be happy to pull it in, and bring it at the next meeting. Because it's a report that has a lot of great information about the district and now what we're doing. And I'd love to highlight that and have you ask questions. So I'd be happy to postpone it. It's a problem if we postpone it until the next meeting.
Yeah, this is a report that we've been producing now for a number of years, about 5 years. There was not a great amount of interest in prior boards, which is why it was moved to consent calendar to begin with a number of years ago. We were more than happy to bring it forward and have discussion about it. We're actually very proud of it. There's a lot of really good information and useful information in it. So if the board wants to hear a presentation on it, we would love to do that.
I would agree with my colleague. I was concerned that it was sitting on the consent calendar, and since he pulled it, I didn't need to do so.
We'd be happy to put it on the next one.
Yeah, why don't we continue that then, and we'll put it on next month as an action item, if there's no time sensitivity to us needing to file it right now. All right, so we'll continue that. And then, item L, and we'll bring it back next month.
And I'd like when we bring that back is how do we dovetail it to the last report that we looked at? Because they really do run hand in hand. The organizational assessment, they do run hand in hand. So how do you cross-reference those two documents?
Yeah. All right, so we can go ahead. I think we don't need to vote on that, right? We're gonna continue it, and then we'll go ahead to 4.2, which was consent item M, receive and file third quarterly report for fiscal year 24-25. I'll turn it back over to trustee Matias.
I'll be quick, thank you, President. So I just have a couple of quick clarifying questions for our finance lead. There's a variance for the wastewater capacity funds. 200%, we're at 200% of what you had budgeted for the year. I want to get some clarity on that. And then you're also over, as of the third quarter, on your operating expense for operations, materials, services, and major maintenance. So I also want some clarity on that. And then,
Would you help if we went one at a time?
Yeah, one at a time. Sure. What was the first one again? It was the capacity charge?
the wastewater capacity fund, that was number one.
Are you talking the revenue side or expenditure side?
On the revenue side.
Revenue side. Okay. So a variance in that category is actually good news. Just means we've received more in capacity charges than we budgeted. The main reason for that is that we've had more development than we anticipated when we built the budget 2 years ago. And so we've had more development has resulted in more capacity charges, like development fees, and therefore, that's why there's more revenue than money.
What's the development fee to the districts?
These are the fees that developers pay as capacity. So it's, do you want the individual unit amount or the totals?
So, let me connect it to the last item. One of the things that was highlighted in that report is that, on the, I think it's on the stormwater side of the house, we have some issues with revenue.
Yes.
So what I'm trying to get at is like, is there something for us to tease out as a board? That would be helpful for a future conversation around revenue enhancement?
Yes. So on the capacity side, we receive, and just to give you context, about $2.5 million what we have sitting in the bank right now for wastewater capacity. And we receive in a few $100,000 a year on average in that area. So that's money that can only be used to expand the size of pipe or expand the capacity within the sewer collection system or treatment system within the thing. So that money is it's dedicated, it can't be used for operations, it can't be used for renewal replacement, it can be only used to expand the size of the system, either in the pipe system or in the treatment plant. So that on the stormwater side, it's sort of the same way, except we don't have a treatment system. But that money then gets collected. We get a little bit more money there than we do on the sewer side on an annual basis. And that money is dedicated, goes dedicated fund. It can be only used to increase the capacity of the stormwater system. So our funding problems within stormwater are really on the operational side. And none of the money that we collect for capacity charges can be used for operations by law.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. The next question is operating expenses. And I'm specifically looking at the operations, material services, and major maintenance category. Just want you to explain the variance.
The main source of variance on that one's a couple-fold. One of it's going to be in, this really just gets down to the cost of things. This is the cost of equipment that we're using to replace certain areas. It's going to be the cost of any material we use in construction, non-CIP construction work. And major maintenance is going to be those things that are not capital in nature, but still are fairly expensive. We've seen increases in all of those, some of it a little bit recently, but even just long-term basis from inflation. So the budget was built 2 years ago. And what we've seen is that those components within our budget have gone up a lot higher than we anticipated 2 years ago. We're not terribly concerned about it because we manage our budget not to those specific line items, but to the collective within the fund. So when we look at the fund in total, we're still only at 74% spent for the year. And so we're still collectively within the budget we've adopted for that fund. And so even though that particular line area it's higher, we have savings in other areas that we're able to draw from to pay for that. And then you'll see when we look at the budget later on tonight, that particular line is an area where we're seeing a lot of increase on the budget because of that experience that we've had this year.
You saved me a question, I love it. Last question, safety incidents, break-ins, damage to facilities, theft. February and March, you had three reported safety incidents for each month. I guess this goes to the general manager. Anything you want to comment around that this board should be aware of, should be taking action on?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd have to look what they are, but I did send you a report recently that kind of listed out all of the safety incidents that we've had. So that included everything that we've had. I'd have to look exactly what we're reporting on this part. But yeah, safety incidents, I don't know if that's just the plant ones. Could be break-ins, breaking fences, things like that. There's also safety incidents in the field. I'm not sure if that report includes that.
It would include that as well.
Yeah, then it's also, breaking into vehicles, things like that, breaking windows, things like that in vehicles. But what I sent you recently kind of was everything that's happened at the district.
Okay, so that incorporates. Okay, so on that, President, thank you.
All right, thank you. Anything else from the board? Go ahead.
So in relationship to your capacity funding, is there any correlation to that and the county quarter?
There's not.
There is not. So can you help the general public understand what's been the holdup from the VFWD side of the county quarter, if any?
So maybe I can answer that one. So Conley Quarter is a development, and you're talking about Maryland. Maryland itself is privately owned for the most part. I mean, there are ownerships like Toro that's owned, and there's other parts that are other owners, but for the vast majority of it, the Eastern Lake Transfer piece that went to Lennar and now Maryland Company, it's a private parcel. It's the old Navy system that was built a long time ago with a lot of different pipes. In the original reports, the specific plans showed that there's major I&I in the pipes. That basically I&I is influent infiltration, which means that they're getting a lot of water in the system that could be coming from tidal influence, or it's just the groundwater that's in the system. So that's been occurring over time and it's been happening for a long time. The Maryland Infrastructure Assessment that's been done with the conjunction of City MS measured it and to figure out, hey, how much I&I is coming in the system. And the shipping area in that downtown area where Conley Quarter is, it has a peaking factor of 29-1. And what that means is that for every gallon of wastewater, so typically most wastewater plants, maybe 3-1, 4-1, 5-1, maybe. 29-1 is outrageous. I mean, it is just, the pipes are, if there are pipes there, I mean, they're taking in a ton of water into the system. What the Navy bought is they bought 2.5 million gallons a day. And a big storm's highly exceeding it. So there's no capacity in the system right now for new development because there's not capacity in that existing pipe system that's out there.
So for the capacity funding you're talking about, so what is the purpose of that?
So it is to help out that, but these are private pipes.
These are private pipes. So
who owns the pipe?
correct.
This is the.
Maryland Company does. And so this is, it's a debatable item. We've talked a little bit about this. There was a time in 2005 that this board and the city council said, hey, we'll take ownership of it. We'll take ownership of the pipes. It was never recorded, was kicked back. But even at ownership of the pipes, the developer is still responsible for those pipes to fix them to meet their needs. It's all on private property. There is no district property in that Eastern Early Transfer piece. All the pump stations are, actually, they're still owned. I mean, we don't own the property out there. So we've been in a maintenance kind of agreement, but there's no agreement for it. So Maryland Company, there's an agreement with the city of Vallejo and the DDA that we're not part of. So for owners of anything, we should have been part of the DDA and we're not.
So I asked this question to find out because we in this board, we're all obviously looking to how do we better improve Mare Island. And so if capacity is the issue, I want to raise the question of how do we get past this? If we need to identify other players or stakeholders, we need to have them here at the table so we can have this conversation. So we can figure out who's going to be responsible for what, who's going to design what, and how are we going to fund all of this?
Correct. Yeah, and a great, there is a kind of a roadmap for that. So at Toro, they basically have their own parcel in the Maryland Infrastructure Study. It said there's, a lot of I&I on the island. We have an agreement with them to say, hey, you need to fix this. And right now they're working to fix it. So they're making efforts to reduce their I&I on their parcel. And so that's the same thing with the developer, Maryland Company, is working on their parcel to basically solve the I&I problem. And in order to do that, they have to solve that to basically add, to make the capacity. Because right now it's over capacity of what the Navy purchased.
I would agree with trustee McCulloch. I think that we need to have the right players at the table because the Conley Street Corridor project has been put on hold and they only have a certain amount of time before there was commitments to the city made that project would be completed. And it's our understanding now that, at least my understanding, and maybe it's wrong, is that it had been previously approved. And now there's been a secondary review by the Loyal Flood Wastewater District and you put a stop to the project. So I'm not sure exactly how that happened or why, but I think we can't wait for us to keep pointing fingers and deciding who is responsible. So I would like for this board to support and have you all work with the city and with Maryland Company and have a resolution.
So that's great.
I'll jump in at this point, and we're pushing it. I'm kind of back in my agenda mode of this is a really important conversation, but we're kind of pushing it on the financial report. But trustee/councilmember Paul Maras and I have set up a couple of meetings with VFWD and Mare Island Company to start those conversations, and then as soon as there are updates, we'll be happy to bring them. Because I think
time is of the essence though, because we are quickly losing ground on that project, and we'll never be able to move it forward without having that done. And bigger planning is not gonna solve the issue, so.
Yeah, that meeting's that means next week.
27,
Yeah,
27.
that means next week, so,
Absolutely.
yeah, we're on.
Yeah, we'll have an update for, on our next board meeting here.
Yeah,
Where we stand.
yeah,
Okay.
at
Thank you.
least some level of progress.
Yeah, I think it's
Other comments on
important.
the, yeah,
I think it's important because constituents has been pointing this out as well. And it's coming to us at the, you know, city council level. So I think this is very important to understand the details.
yeah, we can bring that back as an update, next month. Any other questions about the quarterly report? I like the questions that were asked. I just have one comment, the very small right at the beginning, it says second quarter. And I got confused and we can just change that, that's a quick fix. Other than that, I really appreciated how it's very clearly presented, the actual versus budget. I found it really easy to digest.
This
So I
is a new
appreciate that.
format for us. And all the
Yeah.
Credit goes to Olivia.
I'm a fan of it.
for doing
I
that.
haven't seen any of the others, as this is our first one, but, I appreciate it.
We do, she
Yeah.
did a great job.
Yeah, go ahead, trustee Glenn.
Thank you. In that same file, I see you have a couple of incidents that's happened, that says there's some injuries. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Sure, I can't go into any specific detail about what the injuries are. What I can tell you is that all three of those injuries were small, and all three of those incidents, the employee declined any medical intervention.
In the month of February as well?
We haven't had any major injuries the entire year.
Oh, it says here you did.
Not major injuries.
Oh, but both those were small incidents?
Yes.
Anything else?
And did they happen on the plant or in the field?
I don't know the answer to that. I could find out.
Oh, thank you, I appreciate that. You can email me.
Sure.
Anything else? And if not, do we have a motion to approve, receive and file this
Oh,
report?
sorry, it does say you have one. It says worker compensation, March 1, on the job injuries.
I believe that was an employee who originally declined medical intervention and then went to the doctor the following day.
And
So
then
that will be recorded as,
workers' comp,
it will be recorded as workers' comp, but there was no time loss.
thank you.
Great, do we have a motion to approve this?
Sure, I move that we receive and file the third quarterly report for fiscal year 24 and 25.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposition? No abstention? So that is passed. That is gonna bring us to item 4.3, which was the consent item E. Adopt resolution approving the revised salary schedule for the 2024-25 fiscal year, and I'll turn it over to trustee Lejeune who pulled this.
Sure, I just would like to have clarity on the schedule. And I know the schedule has the Director of Human Resource and Risk Management, and then which is code 108. And then we have Human Resource and Risk Manager, which is code 135.
Yes.
And then according to the revised, are we deleting? I thought we had talked about the Human Resource Director staying the director and not being placed under business services in that way. So did something change? I'm just trying to reconcile these two.
Happy to give the answer to that. It's a great question, really attention to detail. So what happened, we have these positions that are they're negotiated with our management association. And so at that point, we had a director of human resources and risk management position. We then came to the board several meetings ago and asked to create a new classification called the human resources risk manager. At that meeting, the board approved both the classification and the new salary for that. However, because the director of human resources is a negotiated position and a negotiated salary with our association, we can't delete it. It's like, so what happened, we just created the new one, and they both exist. And then it's up to management to determine at which classification to fill that position, whether it be at the director level or the management level. And recently, when we were going through the application process, found who we wanted to hire to be our new head of human resources, made the determination that that person was a director where they were, had the experience to really be functioning at the director position. And Mr. Comco made the decision to hire that person, not at the manager position, but at the director position.
Okay, and so I'm gonna say that I definitely understand that Mr. Tomko, our director, has the latitude to decide. And yet at the board, we did discuss that, even though, yes, you aligned. But I do want to say that at the board level, we did make a decision that we were gonna keep that position at the director level. So that's why I was trying to figure out why. I understand from a union perspective, if you will, bargaining unit perspective. And so thank you for honoring our requests and making sure that that position stays at the director level.
Yes. And one of the things is, it is separate, so it's its own department.
Yes, exactly what I was looking for.
And we're gonna share that in one of the next presentations.
Any other questions on this item?
So you did hire someone already, right?
I'll mention that in the next presentation, but yes,
Thank
I'll
you,
go a little more detail then.
thank you.
All right, so do we have a motion to approve this item?
I move that we adopt a resolution number 2025-6148, approving the revised salary schedule for the 2024-2025 fiscal year.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Or abstentions? All right, approved. That is gonna be, go ahead.
Can I have a clarified question, just for our understanding? Is there a threshold of an amount of something that would need to go from consent to an action item?
You mean a dollar amount?
Yes. Yeah, I'm just curious, because I'm looking at these 654,000, 300,000, and in just reference to our city of Vallejo, we have a threshold of $100,000. Anything above $100,000 would have to come in front of us as an action item, as opposed to consent. So I just out of curiosity, just wondering, is there a threshold?
Not that I'm aware of.
No.
I think it's $1 million, actually.
Well, I mean,
For the,
I
$1
just
million
don't,
for action.
I don't think we have anything as part of this board that was set.
yeah, I was just curious, so, okay.
Can we revisit? Would you like to?
I was just asking the
But
question,
you
I think that's a
consent,
conversation
$1
that
million.
yes,
Right?
because I think that's a bylaws revision that would have to go into a more extensive
Yeah.
conversation.
My understanding is that the city manager can approve anything up to 100,000. Anything between 100 and $1 million could be on either consent or action, and if it's over $1 million, it has to be an action. I think that's what you were getting, right?
Yeah, I thought it was 100,000.
We have, because the city manager can approve anything under 100,000. And then after that, it comes to council.
So according to our purchasing policies that we have here at the district, the general manager can approve anything up to 200,000 without board approval, but anything over 100,000 has to be reported to the board.
Okay.
But
And
just
there's no-
reported as.
Just reported out, right? And then anything between 100 and 200 is reported, anything above 200 goes to the board. But there is no determination as to what goes on consent versus what goes on an action item.
All right, and that is gonna bring us to item 5, which is our public hearing on the status update on vacancies and recruitment and retention. You know what, I'm gonna turn it over to General Manager Tom Coe.
Sure.
Now it's the items, this is the formal hearing.
Thank you.
I'll
So,
kick it over to you.
Thank you. So we're receiving and following the annual public hearing on the status update on vacancies and recruitment and retention efforts of Vallejo Flood and Wastewater District in compliance with California Government Code, Section 3502.3. So this is part of Assembly Bill 2561 that added this government code to the Myers-Millis Brown Act, that's the Labor Act for public agencies. And this new law became effective January 1st, 2025. So I'll turn it over to Jeff Tucker, our Business Services Director, to provide the item.
Normally I would be giving this report, but I'm filling in as the HR director until we hire our new. Just so that you know, the intention right now, we have a conditional offer out for our new Director of Human Resources. She is anticipated to start probably the very end of July or beginning of August. She's asked for a little bit of time off between her old gig and the new gig, which we have the right person, so we certainly want to accommodate that. So we will have a chance to meet her. If not on the interim basis, she would be at the September meeting for introductions. We're very excited. We think she's a great person, a great business. Right. So as Manager Tomko mentioned, this is a new requirement for the district. If you have not seen this yet at the city or at the county, we will. It's every government, regardless of even if they have any employees, even small governments that don't have employees, still have to do this report. As was mentioned, this was put in the Myers-Millis Brown Act, which is the labor relations section of government code, which is a little bit telling because this is supposed to be a bill that is useful and helpful to unions within the state. The idea behind this was that there's a concern about there being a number of vacancies within government. And that some of those vacancies could undermine not just public service, but could also undermine labor relations. And so that really was the driving forces behind this. What it really means for us is that we're going to be transparent with our vacancies, with our recruitment efforts, that we will present that information both to you, but also to our unions. And we provide the opportunity for our unions to speak on this as well. We did invite our Teamsters business manager, Donnie Garcia. I don't see him in the room. I don't think he's able to make it here tonight, but he's seen the report. He's aware of what we're presenting tonight. And Justin Keating, who is the president of our management association, is also here. I don't think you have any prepared remarks, but you're available for questions. Okay, great. All right, so we're required to do a number of things as part of this presentation and report. We do have to have a public hearing. It was noticed in the newspapers, also noticed to our unions and management association, and we're required to have this meeting before budget adoption. Our intention is to adopt the budget at the next board meeting, so here we are tonight. We do give a report, staff report within the packet of job vacancies, but I'll also go over the numbers real quickly right now. We also are required to describe the recruitment and retention efforts we're making within the district. And if we have any issues, we need to identify any policies, procedures, or activities that present obstacles to our hiring process. What I would like to do is just kind of go through at this point some of the numbers that were in your report. For the Teamsters bargaining unit, that's about 3/4 of our employees are in Teamsters. We currently have 3 vacancies, which is a fairly low vacancy rate. 2 of those are in recruitment, and one of those we're through the budgeting process going to convert to an engineering position and then start recruitment at that point. So we have every intention of recruiting these positions. We actually are already recruiting an assistant engineer right now. Due to a promotion of associate engineer into a senior position, and so that position became vacant. And so if we actually go through that recruitment, which we're doing right now, I'll get to that in a moment. If that's successful, we have like 2 candidates. We actually have the ability at this point of hiring 2 from that recruitment if we want to. If we only want to hire 1, we could sort of wait for this process to play itself out and do another recruitment in 6 or 12 months from now, depending. The good news is that the maintenance mechanic lead and the assistant engineer position are vacant because of interim promotions. And so we have this, trying to promote internally, and that's sort of the result of that. The management association has a few more vacancies. We have 4 because there are only 19 positions. That leads to about a 21% vacancy rate. As you know, the director of HR, safety risk management, as I mentioned, we have a conditional offer out to her right now. We're going through background checks and all those kinds of things right now. We have management analyst and procurement position. This was something that we converted another position within finance to be this management analyst position, that we have received applications and we're doing interviews in, I think, a week and a half on those positions. And then the safety manager position is opened up and we're currently accepting applications. Safety manager is a little bit tricky right now because that person reports to the director of HR. And so we're timing that recruitment right now so that the director of HR will actually be in the position before we actually do interviews for that. And so we've kind of delayed on that one to make sure that that can time up. We have been working with the person that we've offered the job to. She knows the plan, she's on board with the plan, and she's in support of what we're doing right now. And then finally, we have a safety risk management analyst. This is a position that became vacant through a retirement of a long-term employee. What we've done on this one is we're holding it until we actually hire both the director of HR and the safety manager. The position reports to the safety manager. And we want to make sure that both we have those positions filled so those 2 people can kind of make a good decision about who to hire. But it's also provided us the opportunity to take our safety risk technician and temporarily upgrade her to management analyst to give her an experience of doing the job for several months so that she'll have a much better opportunity for internal promotion, internal moving up during that time. So it gives her a few months to actually have experience in doing that. So that's what we're trying to do within those positions. Because we have over 20% within one of our associations, we are required to identify what are the policies and procedures that are causing us trouble. We actually don't believe we have any policies and procedures that are causing us any difficulties. But we'll go through a little bit of information that the efforts we're trying to do for all of this. Within our strategic plan, we have the requirement of milestone 1A, which is the development of employee master plan. we had the conversation at the last board meeting around the organizational assessment. I think Manager Tomko at that time kind of mentioned that this was the employee master plan. That was sort of a misstatement on his part. And he owns it. But that the assessment is really just one part of an employee master plan. So what I want to do, since most people don't really know what employee master plan means, is kind of walk through a little bit of what the components of the plan are. So you have an idea of that, and along the way, I'll kind of show some of the progress we've been making both through recruitment and retention. So the first element is to actually do an organizational assessment, which we've completed. The idea here is that a consultant comes in, looks at our organizational structure, looks at our staffing levels, and says, are you overstaffed? Are you understaffed? Are you misstaffed in different departments? What is your organizational structure? Would you benefit from having different organizational structures? And then doing an employee survey, looking at what we call an engagement survey, looking at sort of are people happy with their jobs? Do they tell their friends it's a good place to work? Those kind of assessments to try to determine whether employees actually like working here as a measure of how well we're going to be able to retain and engage those employees. So that's what the assessment has done for us. That helps feed into other areas of the employee master plan. The second element is recruitment. So those are going to be looking at strategies around where do we need to be outreaching within the community. Is it career fairs, community events, tours, presentations? So where do we get the information out in the community that water generally and the Floyd wastewater district particularly are good places to work? Additionally, we also want to look at what are the best partnerships that we can forge. For instance, with Baywork. Baywork is a collection of 43 water and wastewater agencies in the Bay Area focused directly on getting people to get into the trades in water and wastewater jobs. So it's a very highly effective organization that I've been a member of now for over a decade. It's really focused on what we need, but there are other opportunities for partners. Certainly working with local unions, high schools, community colleges, Maritime Academy, Travis Air Force Base. There are a number of places that we can engage and partner with to get sort of a better alignment and having not just us trying to get our message out, but people in those organizations also aware of us so that they know we're an opportunity for their own folks. The third element of the master plan is looking at employee retention and engagement. Oh, let me go back for a second. I do want to note that our average days to fill vacancies has remained fairly stable. We did have some trouble during 2020, which is for obvious reasons. But with that outlier there, we've actually been fairly stable and consistent at being able to fill our vacancies. For employee retention and engagement, this is really around how do we keep the employees that we have here and engaged and happy. Elements of that are going to be what are we doing for internal communications to make them know that they're part of the team. They want to know, like for recognition and rewards, making sure that good work gets recognized, that people are here because they are being seen. We also want to make sure there's good work-life balance, looking at employee wellness and well-being. And again, it's taking the elements of that survey, which we've done, and saying, okay, where are the areas where we're having trouble? Where do we think we can improve the culture? And looking really at that data to be specific in how we want to improve in those areas. So that's the third element of an employee master plan, is looking at engagement and retention. And then finally, it's going to be employee development and succession planning. So this is going to be for those employees that we have, once we have them from the earliest levels of internships, how do we build career ladders? How do we provide our technical training to our employees to make sure they're building subject matter expertise? Are we building leaders from within? Our last HR director, Alexandria, developed this thing called the Power Academy, which is preparing our wastewater employees to rise. But it's sort of an in-house, how do you become a great leader within this organization? So it's teaching a lot of not only the soft skills of leadership, but also some very technical information that you typically are never going to get until you become a supervisor. So it starts bridging that gap between sort of the rank and file employees and the supervision employees. We're also looking at educational reimbursement. We have that right now, but should that be expanded? This is around the idea to make sure that people are being able to meet qualifications for promotional jobs. And then finally, we do a fairly good job, but what else could we be doing? on job shadowing, rotation, cross-training, those kinds of things. So all of those are individual elements of what this plan may be. Now, we're not gonna tell you that the plan is done, it's not. This is something that we're hoping our new HR director will come in, take the lead on, bring her own expertise from her own experience to this. As an outsider, kind of look at organization from an outsider's eye and see where it could be improved from that experience. Look at the data that we have and then build a plan that we can then bring back to you as it's being built, to get check-ins and see where it's going, and then finally have the board sort of understand and improve it there. So that's when we're talking about employee master plan, that's really the vision that we have for doing this. And with that, open any questions, what they
We'll start with trustee Leonard, we'll come around. So I'm gonna circle this back again, because I think it's really important, and it's maybe that I'm a systems thinker. And that is the employee master plan, the documents that we have, your annual plan, and all the work on the survey, that report that was developed by your consultant.
Yep.
How does that all dovetail, so that when we get to the end of the year, when we do the next 25, I can see, since I'm gonna be here with you for 4 years, I can see exactly how all these pieces run together. Here's what we say we're gonna do, here's what we said, here's all the feedback from our employees, and here are all the different, our master plan, whatever, however we choose to build it out, because that's the metric. And here is the result year after year. Or if we're looking at it semi-annual and then at the final year, however that is chosen to be done. But it's how can we see where we've moved from time to what we say we're going to do, to what those results look like, where are the gaps, what else do we still need to do? Because again, I'm going to come back to something that is extremely important to me, is when I think of executive leadership needs to look like the community we serve, and the employees that we are trying to hire should look like the community we serve. So those are those other pieces that come into this employee master plan, but how are we really building to that?
Right.
And I'm not saying you have to have an
No,
answer.
I love the systems thinking element of it. And I think what you're saying makes sense. I mean, that we have, what I see is we have a strategic plan where elements of it are looking at operational elements and our employee elements as well. This is designed to really get at the employee element, but I think it's gonna build a plan that's gonna take several years to get there. As that plan gets built, we're gonna be starting our strategic planning process. So this is gonna be moving along before we start that process. So we're hoping that this plan will sort of feed into that strategic plan that will be started for, what, 6 months maybe, or what? Okay, hopefully. Feeding into that process so that it's developing the internal strategies around employee development, around retention, around recruitment. And those strategies should have measurable objective components to them. Those then feed up into the higher strategic plan for what are the things that you're going to evaluate the district on and whether we're being successful. So that's kind of the idea, is this will build that ground level, build the objectives that will then feed into the strategic plan that you'll be working on in a few months.
So your strategic plan, yes, it'll feed in, because it's a byproduct of the strategic plan. So what are the 3 things, or 4 things, or 5 or 10, whatever it is, that the strategic plan is going to address? Employees, operations, community engagement, so forth and on, whatever it is, that's only a byproduct of it, and I'm just using it as an example. But when it's all said and done, I should be able to, I'm just speaking for Tanya, I should be able to take all of these components that when you come to us in 6 months, here's our strategic plan, these are all of our goals. Well, what are all the feeder points for those goals? This is only one feeder point. I'm just using it as an example. It's one feeder point, but the reality of that one feeder point impacts the entire strategic plan, whether we're doing operations, whether we're doing community engagement, and so forth and on. They are just feeder points that help us to be successful and measure where are we meeting our goals, year 1, year 2, year 3,
Yes.
year 4, year 5?
Yes,
And I'm just making a point that my expectations will be that I can see a clear connection, because you should be able to, because then that tells me how well potentially your staff understand their part in the strategic goals that this agency is laying out,
yes,
right?
yes, and if we're doing it
Because
right,
everybody should know what their part is in those
Yes.
strategic goals.
and if we're doing it right, the strategic goals are gonna feed against each other, or with each other.
Right.
So that what's happening on the employee development side is in line with what's happening on the community engagement side, which is in line with what's happening. on the
Yes.
side.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, other questions from the board? Trustee Matias?
So I'm gonna say the same thing trustee Ledger said, but just in a different way. This presentation is unsatisfactory to me. And the reason why this presentation is unsatisfactory to me is because the purpose of that new law that passed was for you guys to identify or to share out, in the sake of transparency, what were the specific things you were doing to address those vacancies in those departments, right? So I think what would be helpful is very tactically present information to us and to the staff of what it is that you're doing other than engaging organizations and walking us through what a plan is at a high level, so that they know that you're taking every step possible to fill those vacancies, and then to ensure that you are being thoughtful, as you shared in one of the examples, right? We're exposing this person to this opportunity to possibly promote them, and so I think, to trustee Ledger's point, yes, it's important for us to see how all these pieces tie together. But if I'm a staffer, right, I wanna see what's the game plan to make sure that these positions are being filled in the next 60 days, and that should be a part of this. So I would just encourage you guys, it's the first time we're doing it, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah.
To just really strike the right balance, so that both the board and members of the staff here can look at this and feel reassured that every step is being taken possible, because right now, this presentation feels more like an educational exercise for us than it is for the intended audience, which is the staff. So that would just be my piece of feedback. And I don't want you guys to take this the wrong way, it's more like, let's just get at the heart of what the law is meant to address.
And I actually wish that the union representative were here, because I think that's also part of his speaking points as to whether the union believes that we're doing a good job in terms of being strategic or tactical, in terms of filling positions, are we doing it fast enough, are we getting the right people, that sort of thing. So, I'm meeting with them in a couple of days, we had to postpone a few meetings, so I can certainly bring that sentiment back to him as well, to try to figure out from them internally whether they believe as an association or as a union, whether we're being tactical, whether we're being strategic, whether we're meeting the goals that they have as well as employees.
Yeah, and I would just.
So I can bring that message back to them as well.
For sure, and I would just encourage you to just share the presentation with him too,
I am.
and just say, hey,
I am.
what do you think about this? The folks that you represent, is this something that will sort of land with them, or what information would be helpful for us to present next year, so that, we're making sure we're meeting folks with that.
Sure, thank you.
All right, trustee Gordon?
Yeah, so I heard from some of your staff, and they're not happy.
Be very careful just talking about specific personnel, since we're in a public board meeting, I don't want us to get too in the weeds.
I'm not sure what you're saying, but I just said no names. I
Okay.
said, yeah, I'm just saying, I heard from a couple of your staffers, and they're not happy, and they don't feel that they're being heard. And all of us got the same email, I'm assuming. So I know that that's not something always easy, but what are we doing to address those concerns? Because going off our last meeting that we just had, those that came back, and then some of them even who were your past employees watched the video and also reached out to me. So Again, I'm assuming they reached out to all of you, but anyways, and there is a lot of gaps, especially towards women, but I also want to take this time to apologize to anybody if I offended them at the last time when they were being honored to be promoted. So I want to apologize up front about that. I did have some concerns, but I wasn't trying to step over your opportunities or even to the new hires. So I'm going to say that first of all. So I hope you accept my apologies and thank you for your transparency in sharing that I offended you. But anyways, so that a lot of the females feel they're not giving that proper opportunity to rise up, even though they are doing the work and have been doing the work, and without the title nor the pay. So, you know, you're here every day, you know that if this sounds foreign or not, but hoping that you can address that. And as a board, we are responsible to that call, so to speak. So hopefully you would be completely transparent about those complaints and those concerns and how we as the board can better support you. Thank you for letting me share.
Question.
I do like, I do have a meeting scheduled with the union in 2 days. And so I'm hoping that whatever these concerns are now, you gotta be at a little bit of disadvantage. I actually don't know the email you're referring to. I'll try to figure out what it is. I'm sure that you will bring it to me. And we'll address these issues in that form.
Appreciate that.
Great. Other questions? Comments? All right, we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing. Are there any members of the public that are wishing to provide? Go ahead.
Just real quick, and I might have missed it because I haven't really deeply perused the website. But does this organization have a whistleblower program, a hotline?
Yeah, good question. I saw the city council meeting. We don't have one specifically. It's contained in other documents. So it is something we can work on.
So each of our policies around HR have elements within them on how they would complain, either depending on circumstances, whether it's appropriate to complain to a supervisor or to an HR director, general manager, or legal counsel. There are a number of different mechanisms depending upon what the situation might be. A safety concern might be treated very differently than, say, a discrimination concern. And so there are a number of ways within each of the policies as to how that can be done. But we don't have an overall whistleblower policy because it's fairly tailored to each one of our HR policies. We're in the process right now of reviewing all of those HR policies, and we can determine whether a whistleblower policy in general would fill certain needs that aren't being filled by those individual policies.
So, with all due respect, I hear you, they're embedded in all the different policies. And so again, from a point of transparency, I come from a extremely large agency of over 30,000 employees. And whether you're 5 employees or 1 million, there really needs to be a central way that staff at any level understand very easily how to report, whether it's a safety concern, whether it's an HR, because it's a potential discrimination complaint, so forth and on. And the reality is for staff and for someone who has spent basically my entire career in doing this kind of work, for staff, it really doesn't, they don't take the time to delineate whether a harassment complaint, a discrimination complaint, a safety complaint, so forth and on. Should I go to this person, that person, or whatever the case may be? Because as an organization, from a risk management perspective, how do we mitigate our risk and ensure that we have a central location where we have a system where things can come in, and then having an appropriate independent way, in a safe way, a protected way to move things through versus requiring staff to determine, oh, I go to HR and I make a discrimination complaint. Oh, I go to the safety officer and I do X, Y, and Z. I don't think that's fair. You do this every day. I do this every day. You do this every day, because it's your responsibility to understand where all that is lodged. But it should not be the responsibility of a staff person to understand every place that they need to go. So I would submit that to you and say,
what does that hotline look like? How is it laid out? Because that is part of our risk management, right? No different than you've taken the time to have someone, you've paid someone to come and do your survey around satisfaction. Well, how do we continuously understand what's going on in our agency and where our employees are when they do need to lodge their dissatisfaction, their complaints, whatever the case may be, in a very safe environment? So I would submit that to you.
No, I think that's helpful. I remember watching the city council meeting, you provided a city of San Francisco, I think, as an example, so.
San Francisco,
So we can-
Oakland does
So we
it.
can take a look at it.
Yeah, there's a way to create transparency around all of that without endangering, if you will, the individual who are making those complaints. There is a way to do this work. And I've spent a good 10 years doing it and figuring out how to protect individuals in the work and get the work done. And staff and community really do appreciate that when that's another level of transparency that's protected. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I have one more question. Do you value anonymous complaints as well?
We do receive anonymous complaints, yes.
You still consider to be counted though?
They're counted and investigated.
Thank you so much.
All right, with that, I'm gonna go open up the public hearing on this item. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak to us? None, all right. With that, there is no board action required for this item. So we will go ahead and move to item 6, which is our administrative items, and we just have one around the budget. So I'll turn it over to General Manager Tom Coach, please announce item 6A.
Sure, this is a long one, and I certainly, if anybody needs a break right now, we can certainly have a break if you wanted any of their sandwiches back there or whatever. This one will be a long one, we will have, probably breaks within it. We have 3 separate presentations that are probably about 15 minutes each, to ask questions on it, so.
Do we want to take a short recess? Let's take a 5. Why don't we start at 7? That's easy, like that gives us an easy.
President Source, we're ready for the report.
Yeah, let's go ahead
Okay,
and continue on with, 6A.
okay, so 6A, this is our budget presentation, so I will hand it over to Jeff, otherwise I'll talk too much.
All right, thank you, Tonko. I apologize, you have to listen to me again. But I'm part of a large team putting together the budget here, and so you will hear me for a little bit. You have in your packets and in front of you, copies of the budget. There, first off, just so you know, this is a draft. So as you're going through and you find the typos, you find the comma when there should be a semicolon, those kinds of things, misspelled words, we know that. There's a bunch of stuff that's already been made to the document since we printed these. We know there's a bunch of things like that. So bear with us if you could. In June, we'll have a final document that hopefully will have all of this correct. Until then, we wanted to still present it to you so that you would see within it, the numbers within the budget we believe are correct. They're tied. These are the numbers that we'll be presenting to you in June unless you give us different direction tonight. What I'd like to say is that this is really a budget that's not, shouldn't really be anything that's new from what you've been hearing for a while now. This is an implementation of plans that the board of directors has been giving us now for the last couple of years. I know that everyone has not been a member of the board for the last couple of years. So as we go through this, we're going to remind you and give you a little bit of insight into what the board talked about, mostly in the spring of 2023, when we set our rates. And when we set our rates for that 5-year period, we identified a number of assumptions we were making going into that rate setting process around staffing, operating expenditures, inflation, capital spending, anticipated debt issuance, and the 10-year forecast. So this is really, I think, it's years 3 and 4 of that 5-year plan. And what you're going to see is really the implementation of that plan and no significant deviation from that. Mr. Gomez?
Yes.
Thank you.
My bad.
All right, so tonight, Mr. Tonko mentioned, we're actually gonna set this up in 4 different sections for you. We're gonna present first on staffing, then on revenues and operating expenses, then on capital, and then on debt and the 10-year forecast. At the end of each one of those, we'll stop and have questions from the board at that time on that section, so that you don't have to wait, have all of your questions wait until the very end, but instead that way we also don't have interruptions all along the way. So we'll have a couple stopping points along the way after each one of those sections. All right, so first of all, we're talking about staffing changes. This is a continuation of conversation we had earlier tonight, also a continuation of the conversation we had at the last board meeting. And I had to think about how to present this information in a way that wasn't numbers and spreadsheets and wasn't kind of what we did last time, which was more of a narrative report, but try to kind of present visually the kinds of things that we're doing within our staffing changes. And hopefully you'll see that it's not super significant what we're doing, and hopefully what we're doing will make sense. But I'm going to try to do that through organization and color. So with that, this was the budget, remember the 24-25 budget, the one we're in right now, we adopted this 2 years ago. We do 2-year budgeting. And so this was the structure that we had at that time 2 years ago, and we built the budget based upon what the structure was at the time. So at that time, we had 7 directors. We had a very flat organizational structure. We had 7 people who were reporting to the general manager. And then we also had general counsel that doesn't report to the general manager, but certainly works very closely with the general manager. Each one of those directors had an area of responsibility underneath each one of them. You can see kind of how they're laid out now. They're very traditional types of things: human resources, finance, engineering, operations, that kind of thing. We kind of identified this as a problem early on, even before the year started here, before Mr. Tonko even took on, in that we had sort of too many people reporting to the general manager for a span of control issue, as well as we thought there might be a better alignment in some of these things. And so throughout the couple of years, we've been doing some interim changes along the way. And what I want to show you now is the recommended structure and the way the budget has been built for the way we're structuring the budget in these kinds of departments. So what we have here is 5 directors instead of 7. And I'm going to in a moment show you sort of where the changes came from, right? So the first thing we did, we created a technical services department. We went from, we took the engineering department and the environmental services department and merged them and created the technical services department, which means that the capital development program, which is where we're building a bunch of things, development, where we're working with the community on development review, taking those two programs, that includes inspection of development, that sort of thing, and brought them together with our laboratory, our environmental compliance, and our regulatory affairs folks. So the idea was that there's a fairly good relationship between sort of the environmental compliance people, for as an example, who are doing investigations of restaurants, making sure that grease interceptors are installed properly and being used properly, and the development folks who are working with restaurant owners on doing technical TIs. Thank you. So there's like that synergy, so you can get kind of that thing kind of working together there. Also having the regulatory folks working closely with the capital folks, so that we know when we have these regulatory drivers that are pushing us to do things like nutrient removal or having to do trash capture within our stormwater system, that information is being sort of fed into the capital program and making sure that we have the resources and the projects to start meeting those regulatory requirements. So there's a fair amount of relationship and synergy between those two. Very recently, and as a recommendation of the organizational assessment, we created something that we're now calling business services. And here what we did is we took the finance department, the administration department, merged the two of those together. We didn't have an administrative director at the time, so it was easy to do that. So we brought together, and then with that, brought the community outreach element from environmental services, brought that in, and also brought in the information technology component that was sitting out in operations, to create sort of business services. The idea here is to combine all of the services that are sort of administrative in nature, central in nature, or in the areas of communication that sort of reach out and touch all of the departments. They're working with the capital development department on projects out in the streets. They're working with regulatory folks on outreach programs. They're working with field operations on dealing with neighborhood complaints. They're working with human resources on career fairs and getting information out for potential applicants. So for example, so it's those kinds of programs that kind of cross all the other departmental lines. So these are the areas that we kind of merged around, the ones that are both in that mauve color and then the green color. The ones that are in white stay where they are. There weren't any changes that were made to those particular areas. So this is what it looks like now, and I kept the color coding so you can kind of show where they are. So in business services, we've combined the finance and procurement areas along with communications, which is a new division which combines our outreach, our advocacy, and our clerk of the board. And then the information technology unit comes here in business services. And then technical services has their divisions as well, which are a little more established now, which is the engineering division, which is capital development, the laboratory, and environmental compliance.
Is it?
Do you want to do questions? I don't know, is it, you tell me actually, is it easier to do the questions
If it's
at the end of it?
quick, like just quick, we could probably do it. We'll have a break here in about 2 seconds.
So I'll ask you after the break.
Okay, sure. So in yellow, you'll note that we go to 98 FTE. The new FTE we have proposed for the next fiscal year is the IT manager. This was a position that we talked about, I believe, last time. We had the board approve the classification for it and the salary range for it. And then that's the only position we're adding new in 98, in 2006, 5-6. And then we have an additional FTE that we're proposing to add in the following year, 26-27, and that would be an additional engineering assistant. You remember from the last presentation, we talked about how we're converting an office assistant to an engineer. That's kind of addressing the growth that we have in fiscal year 26. And then we're anticipating one more FTE in 27. So why? For the IT manager, the idea here is that we have 2 IT positions right now. And when one of those positions, people retired recently, long-term employee retired, we realized how we don't have the resiliency we need. This is an incredibly important program for us because everything we do right now is data driven. Our plant is driven by the computers. Our systems, in terms of we get data in from our smart covers, from our lift stations, are all data driven. All the work we do is based upon our data, yet we're not particularly very resilient in that area. So adding a third position adds that level of resiliency. We also know that we need to prioritize cybersecurity more than we are. We've done a really good job of cybersecurity. We're actually better than a lot of our peers. But we also know from reports from the EPA and talking with others that water and wastewater are one of the highest rising areas of cyber attack within the United States. And it's an area that really concerns public health and environment. And so it's an area of it's a vulnerable area in the United States generally, and we want to make sure we're staying ahead of that and making sure that our cybersecurity programs are as good as they can be. We also know that data is our business. There's a lot of data that we have. We can't really do a lot of what we do without the data we get from our systems that are doing, there's monitors within the plant, there's monitors within our collection system. We can't function very well without this data. And so we have a number of computer applications that help us manage that. But these are distributed systems for us. They don't talk to each other. And we haven't done a very good job of accessing that data and using it to make business decisions, integrating that data into different systems using APIs, and certainly creating that data into a database or a private cloud structure that are going to allow us to take advantage of AI. So in order to actually do that, become more efficient, use the tools that are becoming available to us, we need to have someone who has a strategic oversight and management focus to make sure that we're actually focusing not just on the day-to-day, keep the operating systems working, keep the backbone done, replacing servers that go down, but also trying to build upon those data networks and build upon our security needs. So that's the reason for the IT manager. The assistant engineer is a little easier to understand probably in that our CIP is growing. Later on in the presentation, you'll see more presentation about the CIP. But as we're expanding the capital program, as we're increasing the amount of development review we have in our community, there's just more projects that we're doing. In order to accomplish those projects and deliver on our promises, we need to have the staff that are project managing these things. We do anticipate hiring this at an assistant engineer level because we want to make sure that we have the opportunity open as broad as possible. An assistant engineer does not require a PE license. It only requires an EI, I believe, EIT. And so. I'm sorry.
Engineer and training. So
it's someone who does not have their license yet, but has gone through a series of tests along the way.
Thank you.
And so that'll open up the opportunity for someone who is sort of younger in their career, not as experienced, to potentially come into the organization and then grow eventually into that associate engineer level once they get their license. So that's kind of the idea behind these two positions. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Olivia.
Do you want to
take questions now?
Yes.
So going back to the org chart, business services makes a lot of sense. Technical services, I still have deep concerns and reservations about the change that was made there. And so I guess my question to the general manager and to you is like, is this just set in stone? Because I know we offered some feedback to you in the last meeting around it, and I know you guys have on multiple occasions alluded to the latitude that you have in your management capacity, but we also have a fiduciary responsibility. And here's the inherent issue I find with the technical side. The example you shared in relation to that department makes a lot of sense.
It's your plan.
Yeah, neither.
Yeah, we should note cell service is not great in this building. And that could be what's happening.
Because flash time, that's it.
Okay, so The examples that you shared in relation to technical services made a lot of sense, except for one position. And I've spent a lot of time, on environment. So you have that environment position under technical services, if there is some issue that comes up that that position tells the rest of the group, hey, we probably shouldn't do this. The person in charge of technical services can override, and in my opinion, that position should be sitting outside of that structure. There's a lot of regulatory, complaints and reporting, and there should be some level of independence, in my opinion, that position should have reporting into the general manager, and then have the general manager take the call, right? Because then the risk falls with you. But that position sitting under that department, to me, creates, not just interesting power dynamics, but also, I think, increases the liability to the agency. And so, this is the second meeting in a row. We were sharing concerns around this. I don't know what your position on this is, but, I feel very strongly that needs to be reevaluated.
No, I totally understand. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, and that is one part. I mean, the structure, that part of the structure will remain the same, but I am looking at something in relation to what you're talking about directly, so I'll have to get back to you on that one.
As Mr. Pumpkin was looking at that, we've had conversations about whether that makes sense to change and what that would mean. Budgetarily, in terms of the overall numbers, it doesn't change.
Yep.
So that, just so you know, in terms of the fiduciary responsibility, you greatly brought that up as your role. This is just a budget, which just means it's a plan, and it certainly can be amended.
Yeah, but
Yes.
fiduciary also accounts for risk.
It does, yes.
So that's the piece I'm concerned about here.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'd like to highlight, and you made a very good point about this directive. And when we're talking about cybersecurity, I do have experience behind cybersecurity. And I find it really interesting that your IT team responsible for cybersecurity is buried under business services, or does not have a dotted line direct to the director of the organization. In addition to that is, I also find it very interesting for such an important position for an agency such as this, that we're talking about a manager. And I just want to raise that for you. And I'll give an example, I'm just gonna use it. And I know that SFCC is bigger than this agency. We have SCADA, so forth and on. We have the city of Vallejo, we have SCADA and all these different things. But nonetheless, it's an extremely important position that I think warrants just being potentially a manager, and should have much more, the power dynamic in that position is really important. I'm just gonna say that, and I think you know that without me saying it. And again, as you are placing, you're building an organization, you're building these positions, and if I'm sitting in a managerial position, I'm doing cybersecurity, what happens when I outgrow you? Because I'm just a manager. And we've spent all this time investing in building, and we're talking about building blocks. I think we really need to think about, how are we structuring some of these really key positions? That's a control position, no different than the environmental position. It's a control position, and it literally sits up here on the top here when I think about my auditor. Those are control positions. I know that's a contracted position, but nonetheless, that auditor, when they're doing your assessments, your audit work, they have a direct link to your general manager. There's a reason for that. No different than the environmental position, no different than an IT director position who's really dealing with cybersecurity over these types of assets. So I would just ask us, when we're building out this and we're continuing to think about our budget, we're continuing to think about the sustainability and the longevity of what we're creating in an organization is really important.
because buying that position after a certain time becomes literally unviable. And I know that's not a word, but I'm using it for a particular reason, because in government, that's how it feels when we're competing with our private partners. So what do we do so that we are able to keep what we built? Because that's a really critical position. And I know that for a fact, it's hard to buy that talent. So I just want to lay that
That's
out
great.
for us
Yeah.
and to really think about what are we doing when we're laying out this structure and making sure it's at the right levels, enough stacking under those levels for succession planning, and to keep that really great talent.
That's a great comment. Yes.
And we'll go to the vice president and then over to trustee board.
I just wanted to ask about the work orders. I know that we had a lot of conversations in the last budgeting cycle about work orders. And I don't see any additional staff, so I'm wondering where we are with work orders. Are they under control? I know we had a lot of staff that came and spoke out at our board meetings around.
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, for everybody, so it knows that, so what happened is as we're switching, work orders are with our maintenance staff. So they have all these work orders that were input in the system, and we started a new system called Limble. And so all these work orders, as they got the handbooks for any piece of equipment, they put all the work orders in it, and then there was a huge amount of work orders in it, and they're like, look, we have all these work orders, and if you divide it out, there's not enough people to handle all these work orders. So I was looking at these here, you're our new maintenance manager, so that was one of the tasks to say, hey, what are we doing better? And in one of the previous reports, I think it's in the quarterly, it talks about a huge accomplishment that we have, that 85% of our work orders are preventative maintenance now. We've gone from 20% to 85%. So on the preventive maintenance, we have, very little corrective maintenance, meaning that all of a sudden things break, we haven't done anything with it. So all those numbers look good. So Ralph, tell us, when they looked at it, they had a background in this. They really took a big look at it and they said, does it make sense? And what they found out, it looks like things are working okay with the staff that you have. But you're gonna need more information from Limble. As that system gets developed, that'll be able to tell you, as you set up metrics, it's like your overtime hours, how many are your corrective maintenance and what that looks like. We think you're okay right now, but you may need more in the future. So we're in a holding pattern right now, as we get the data in. And I've talked to our new superintendent and we're in agreement right now to kind of look at it and see how.
Because you've been under there for almost a year now, and so you've not.
So Limbo, it's an asset management system with all the assets, so it's probably gonna take 2 or 3 years before it's fully built out. But it's certainly a huge concern that we're monitoring.
So how often are you just really, like, what are the benchmarks? Because you're saying it's gonna take about 3 years to be fully looked out. But I know we're not waiting till we get to the end of 3 years. So what are the benchmark points where you're really looking at, okay, quarter, and after this year is over, Q3, we're gonna look and compare and see, do we need to really consider adding a position without staff telling you, oh, we're overworked?
Yeah, I think, and a lot of it, it's gonna be trying to set those metrics out that are difficult. Right now, the overtime rates are low, and our preventive maintenances, we're at 85%. So if those numbers start falling, our overtime goes high, drop, and all of a sudden we have equipment failing all over the place, then we'll know we have a problem. But right now, working with our superintendent, we can supplement some of that with, just hiring, staff, like, not permanent staff, but bringing staff in to do certain things, because maintenance also like hanging this. It's like, if we bring somebody in to do this, that's sometimes not enough for that. So it's looking at our workload and looking at it in Limbo and say, what can we farm out? And then, say, hey, there's a lot of things here. Maybe we do need to bring somebody else in and we can show the numbers that way. So a lot of it will be kind of working into that.
Trustee Ward.
Thank you so much for that. I do want to re-echo with my colleague saying about IT, because I had a chance to meet with your previous employee before they retired, and they was telling me all of the concerns and making sure that our system is protected. That's, you're very worried about that. And then on this side here, on your graph on page 28, it says board, clerk of board, it says nobody, but I'm looking at Eddie. It says clerk of the
We
board.
definitely have a clerk of the board.
So,
So
maybe it's just a little typo you might wanna, oversight, you wanna check that out.
what that means is that Eddie's actually been moved out of administration, out of general manager's office, and moved into, if you look at the second, on the two sections down, to the next section down, you'll see the clerk again. And again, who's clerk of the board? You'll see the one added. So what that's really showing on that page is that.
Which page you say, I'm
It's
sorry?
on
Same page. So you see the 0 under general manager's office,
Uh-huh.
which is Eddie moving out. And then if you look at the next section down, which is business services, you'll see the management analyst / clerk of the board. You'll see the one added,
Okay.
the second line.
I
And
see.
so that's just showing, that's why it's so hard. That's why I did it graphically, because these tables are really hard to read in terms of keeping track of who's moving where.
So why you took him out of there? What was the purpose, low pay?
They're, the only thing, it's general manager's office. I mean, it's just, we.
He's gonna be by himself?
He kind of came up to work for me.
Okay. Well, all right, that, I saw both of them, I'm like, okay, so
Yeah.
that was confusing, but thank you. for
That's just
clarifying.
representing the change between one department to another.
Thank you for clarifying. And then I do have a concern. I'm looking here at, let me go back up here, where it's at. So it says Director of Finance and Treasurer, it says 9.
Right.
But it does have Finance Manager, Treasurer, and all these other staff, it seems to be overworked, but without the title. That's really concerning. Yeah, you have Finance Manager, Treasurer, but you don't want to give them the title of being a director? I mean, they're doing it looks like they're doing the work. It seems like, what I'm noticing is a lot of title issues.
So the finance manager / treasurer was me.
And you got-
That's the title that I had.
Right?
And then my title changed to business services director. And I
Uh-huh.
was stopped, and I have both finance as well as communications, information technology.
So you just eliminated the director position?
And so right now, the director of finance treasurer is an unfilled classification. And business services now is served during that function. But part of that process, we took the treasury functions away from me and gave them to Olivia. And that's where the finance manager became the finance manager / treasurer. And so that used to, in prior years, that would have just been finance manager. So as she took the treasury functions, she also took the title of treasurer.
Well,
And there'll be-
let's give her
there'll
the title director, do you know how nice that looks? Like she just spoke, as my colleague just pointed out, you know, you worked hard to get there, nothing wrong with being a manager, and it's certainly nothing wrong with being a director either.
There's certainly nothing wrong with it, you're right. It's just a matter of that we've structured our way right now. We have 5 directors within the agency, and there are several managers within business services, as the IT manager, and the finance manager that report to the director.
Yeah, I guess, or, you know, so just ask this clarification, so you're the only person doing finance?
Well, in the entire department, I mean, there's all the other folks that work with her.
Right, so that's what I'm saying, she should get that title. Hopefully I come back, it'd be like, Director Olivia Rodriguez. Yeah, director, I mean, she worked hard for it. Shouldn't be no issue, unless you're concerned about the pay and the benefits that come with it. You got it, be nice, let her have some of that hard work, right? Just, am I alone with
I'm
that
trying to
thought?
figure out how to answer that question. in
I don't know that that's the, that's the
It
level of
is, it is.
granularity we wanna
It
have right
is,
now.
because we're talking about it right here. I mean,
So
you of all people do it to the city, so you should understand that. This is important, because we're talking about women not being promoted. And we've been talking about this concern. And if she's doing the work, she should get the title.
And that's what we've done by giving her the title of treasurer. She's taken on the dip work, she's given the title, and she got a pay raise associated with that.
But it's the word director.
We can't all be directors.
Well, you
We're
were,
shared to do. Yes.
so that's my concern. If you were director, then you should allow
Yeah,
her to be
we
director.
had a point of order.
Hey, this is point of order, this is my
Well, we have to
question.
listen to the point of order.
Okay, but it's my question.
Is the point of order just clarification, because we voted on this position change or title change at the last meeting?
We did not.
Yeah.
We had a specific task though. We did ask a specific task. I know because we pointed out this.
It's in
We did, we
the,
voted on it.
it's in the meeting notes that we received today, that
Okay.
was attached to today's agenda, so I just wanted to
I
give
appreciate
that
that.
point of order.
But again, I'm asking a question, and just like you all ask questions, I should have the same right. You know, so it's my right to ask the question. If he was director, what we voted for him to be promoted up right? We didn't say we was going to eliminate a position. So let's clarify that, because I watched the video. And so I'm just making my concern.
It's in the packet that we have, the
Okay.
meeting, notes that from last month.
I appreciate you pointing order, but I'm gonna point back order. I would like to finish yield my time back. Okay, but I can yield my time back. I wanna just ask a simple question.
Okay, to finish the question, and then I do wanna move us.
Okay, well, will you please move everybody else along too, okay? I appreciate that. So I'm just asking you, if there's nothing wrong with the title, if it's no big deal, and she already got the raise, she should be able to have the title. And that's all, I'm just making my point. Whether you do what you do with it, it's up to you. I'm just saying, because that has been the number one complaint, that women are not being honored
I
in
would just say,
titles.
like, from an HR standpoint,
I
there's
don't need you to
procedures,
explain, because I've been in HR
there's
before, so I
procedures that
understand.
have to be gone through.
All I
to
just
create
said, I'm just
positions,
making
and
a point.
we went through that we went through that
I don't
procedure
want
at
to
our last meeting.
disrespect you, Mayor. Please don't do that to me. Just let me finish my point. I
We
appreciate
just
it.
need to stay
I
on
was
track of
just
the
making, this is the track of the meetings right here. So I was just pointing that out. That's all I'm just saying. What you do with it is up to you. That's all. We're just making some concerns. That's all.
Appreciate the comment.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments on this? And if not, we can continue on with the presentation now. Thank you.
Well, good evening. I'm glad you guys got some snacks at the break. My name is Olivia Ruiz. I am the finance manager here. Let me get to my slides. I'm just going to be covering a little bit of the operating budget. But first and foremost, I just want to thank the staff, the entire staff, on putting together all these budget numbers. As you guys know, the budget process can take months. And so that's normally the process for us. And it's a 2-year budget too, so there's a lot to look at. So just get right into it. So revenue sources. So when we look at the total revenue sources, it looks like revenues from this slide right here is decreasing by the numbers at the top. But actually, it's going from 76 million for the current fiscal year to 73.6 million for fiscal year 27. However, all the sources of funds includes the SRF, which is the State Revolving Fund loan proceeds. And those proceeds are from the MIPS project, which is the Merritt Island Pump Station project, that we got funding for about $50 million. So the lighter sections of the loan proceeds just kind of shows that. But we are increasing revenues, total revenues over the next 2 fiscal years. This slide right here is just a breakdown of categories of our sources of funds. So here, most of our funds are from service charges, 86%. And this represents a lot of the sewer and stormwater service charges. So where do our service fees go? Well, the last slide shows a variety of our revenues coming from service charges. This is just a breakdown of the different funds that Jeff kind of talked about earlier on the budget to actual report, that these 3 funds, the sewer, upper lateral, and stormwater funds, really, we cannot commingle these sources. And so we budget and account for them separately all the time. By far, though, the sewer service charges is the bulk of our revenue. So it's 92%. And just gonna cover it.
So Olivia's asked me to cover this one slide. So as you recall, in the January orientation meeting, there were lots of regulatory and aging infrastructure issues facing the district. In a moment, you'll hear more of the CIP and how we're addressing some of those issues. So we went through sort of a detailed discussion of what are those drivers that are really pushing us for the district. In spring of 2023, we worked with the board pretty intensely to try to figure out where we needed to be. We recommended a 5-year rate plan, the board eventually adopted. After looking at a bunch of different options, I think we brought 3 different options to the board didn't really like any of them. They created a 4th option on the fly. We went forth, did that one, and we modified it slightly and came up with the final version. So it took multiple meetings with the board in order to get to that point, talking about what the impacts would be on the capital spend, what the impacts would be on operations, what the impact would be in terms of our ability to issue debt, because the major driver here is making sure that we have enough revenue coming in year 5 to pay for the debt service that's required to build the regulatory required infrastructure. Does that make sense? And so at that same time, the board was very cognizant, very worried about affordability, and wanted to make sure that we were doing this in a way that did not put too much of a burden, although recognizing it's a high burden not putting as low a burden still on the ratepayers as possible, while still meeting those regulatory driver requirements. This budget does not deviate from the plan that the board set out in 2023. It has the same staffing assumptions, it has roughly the same operating assumptions, and the same capital assumptions that we had built when we built out that rate structure in 2023. So this is really years 3 and year 4 of that 5-year plan.
The next slide, we're just gonna break it down on the 4 major sources of funds, and so the sewer service charges, again, are expected to increase 50% based on the June 2023 rate increase that was adopted and approved by the board. Interest earnings is also going up next year in fiscal year 25 and 26. We anticipate higher interest earnings, but then if there's a trend that is gonna decline over the next couple of years. We do receive revenue from property tax, so we receive a small portion from Prop 13. That by board policy, we allocate these revenues first to the sewer reduced rate program. And currently, we have about 800 customers, property owners that are on our reduced rate program that receive about 17.5% reduction in their sewer bill that we place in the property tax roll. And the remaining of the property tax is allocated to the stormwater program. And then to your right, the stormwater charges. So the stormwater charges, they do not increase, the rates do not increase without the approval of the property owners on the vote. So the total revenue we receive here is only increases based on the adjustment for the stormwater. So next we'll just get into a little bit of the operating expenses.
Can you go back a moment on that? Just to note on one side of it, if you look at the scale, we're talking like $1.5 million of property taxes and $2.5 million of stormwater. So we're talking about $4 million in relation to $63 million that's coming out on the sewer side. So the scale is just vastly off. We'll see later, to keep that number in mind, when we get to the forecast, we're gonna see problems in the stormwater side, and it's rooted all in this issue of that stormwater rate not increasing that way.
And this is our staff hard at work, working on some projects right here that they wanted to put on the PowerPoint presentation. Total expenses, so this is.
Those are finance staff?
Yes. Everyone's a finance guy.
Yes. No wonder I can picture.
So as you can see here, most of our expenses are made up from operations, about 60 to 65% of the budget. And the rest is really dedicated to capital and debt. And as you can see in fiscal year 26 and 27, debt is increasing because we'll have the completion of the MIPS project, a $50 million project, but then we'll also start making payments to those debt service payments. So that's the main difference there. We further just broke it down for you in the different categories here for our operating expenses. And so here you can see the salaries and benefits make up a majority of our expenses, but that also includes the OPEB, which is the other post-employment benefits, which is our retiree healthcare, and the unfunded accrued liability on the pension side. So pension and OPEB, obviously those costs are rising too.
And did I understand you to say you have a different system than the city has, right? A much better one?
For OPEB,
Yeah.
for pension, it's the same.
Thank you. Okay, but the other one is different.
OPEB is retiree health.
Yeah,
Right.
but do you say you have another different one from the city?
Pension is the same, so we have the same system as the city for pension.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah. So some of the cost drivers for salaries and benefits, we've got some increases in health insurance, increases in pension costs. We adopted a new MOU back in June of 2023, August of 2023, so that accounts for that. And then with an additional FTE, which is the IT manager in fiscal year 25, 26, and then additional assistant engineer in 26, 27. Materials and supplies and services. So here we're seeing a lot of increases with the material supplies. As everybody knows, inflation and tariffs are the two major forces that are pushing up the cost of materials and supplies. The essential materials for our workplace really is steel, lumber, cement, and other types of, but those are dramatically increasing. And we've already seen the effects of those tariffs and inflation already happening before things even went into effect. So vendors are already reaching out to us, just giving us a heads up that they're already tagging on 25 to 35% on top of what they've already, or what we've negotiated, or contracted for. So not just inflation, but inflation also affects the material with labor. So a lot of these services that we contract out or hire, the wages are increasing as well. And then transportation costs. We truck in our chemicals, so transportation is rising. Everybody knows freight. And yeah, the tariffs are just, they're going to have a significant impact on our operating budget.
We've had to make the assumption that there will be some element of tariff in the future. We haven't gone crazy on it, but just to give you an idea that all of our pumps are made in foreign countries. There are no US made pumps that we bring in. Much of our chemical actually comes from Canada. Sodium perchlorate actually comes in from Canada. And so we have to pay not just the freight costs associated with that, but the tariff costs, and the chemical itself has actually been increasing fairly dramatically in the past 2 years, even without tariffs.
Is the solid waste transferred to Tug Island? Is that internal staff that does that, or is it
Internal staff.
So when you talk about your contractors, how often do you look at some of the contracted work? Some of it definitely you're gonna truck in, whatever the case may be, you know that. But outside of some of those finite things that you do, how often do you look at the contracted dollars that you're paying out and then potentially making a decision of having a permanent individual?
This particular category is mostly looking at materials, so it's not looking at contracted labor, but it's looking
Well, I'm
at
just,
materials.
yeah,
Right.
I'm talking beyond.
Yeah,
Just-
majority of the contracting that we do for services is actually in the engineering realm. And we're buying services that we don't have those specialties on staff. And the reason for that is that we can't really have a chemical engineer and an electrical engineer and a process engineer. It's more efficient for us to hire firms that have that specialty, then we use them when we need them. And so that's the majority of our contracted services, and we're buying specific types of special services at that point that isn't efficient at this point to maintain those skills in-house.
But certainly to your point, I mean, in Tracy's group, technical services, so we have, like right now, our development contract. So we contract that out and we're getting bills over $300,000 for like that. We need to bring some.
That's right. And we
Yeah,
actually have a
so-
plan to bring that in.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking this question is when I think about an organization, and I've built out organizations, and I agree, oftentimes as we start down the road and we're growing, we find that it's easier to contract out, get those special services, but over time, if we continue to regularly use the electrical engineer, by the time I pay however much, $500 per hour plus the overhead rate and so forth and on, effectively, I can hire that position in-house. And then when needed, if I need additional services, that person holds that expertise and can work with that contractor. Because I think we get really over-reliant, particularly in government, on, oh, it's easier just to go get that service. But as we continue to grow in that service, I'm just asking, where do we stop and say, over the last 5 years, we've spent $5 million contracting out for an electrical engineer. Okay, it's time that we consider bringing in an electrical engineer. And I would like for us to really think about that versus contracting out, creating that position, that expertise in-house. And I know over time, I can say this as somebody who has built construction auditing or looking at sewer laterals for the city and county of San Francisco. When we started out, we didn't have that experience. We brought in contractors. I had staff to begin to work with those contractors. We built those skills and added those skill sets in, and we now no longer pay a contractor, but staff in-house can do this work.
Absolutely.
That's very common, and it's things that we're looking at all the time for a lot of different areas. But yeah, it is looking at that long-term play and what makes sense. Very common.
General and administrative, this category really we budget for consulting and kind of the category you're talking about, the other professional services, and banking fees and fees that we pay to Solano County the property tax roll. And so here, one of the major cost drivers is our legal expenses. So legal has tripled, and so that's due to a lot of
It's not Trevor's fault.
CIP projects, that's due to, contracts reviews, so, and as you well know, other situations as land and Mare Island and all kinds of things, so that's increased. Security services, we brought this to the board, I'm not sure
2 months
when,
ago.
a couple months ago, but security services is increasing as well. We have a full-time, 24-hour security, armed security guard, so that's increasing. And then engineering consulting work as well. I won't pick on Tracy yet, but Tracy could probably talk a little bit about some services that eventually we're trying to bring back in-house as well. And then every 5 years, we have a new permit for our national pollutant.
Limit discharge.
Thank you. But we renew our permit every 5 years, and so this is also accounting for that, which is pretty significant. And then property insurance. So property insurance premiums are increasing, and this is really just due to inflation, heightened risk of the weather, the climate, and rising construction costs. So that accounts for that. And then utilities, good old utilities are always increasing. So we're seeing about an 8% increase in electricity rise and some increases in water rates, but we have seen some offsetting costs with the telecommunications and solid waste and recycling services to help mitigate some of that. I am done. So we'll take a short 15-second break.
Questions?
Questions, but the CIP folks will take over.
Would this be a time just to talk about the overall kind of surplus deficit? I was just curious, in what was passed out to us, it looks like we're looking at about a $2 million deficit.
Which
Next year?
Okay.
This would be 62.
So probably just due to the CIP. The CIP is that,
Okay.
the CIP is really decreasing
Okay.
because the next project is really finalizing. And so we still have a ton of projects, but the fact that,
You answered the next part of my question, which was gonna be, I'm seeing
Yeah.
it come out of the capacity fund.
Right.
Okay. Okay, so that's not like my brain is going to tariffs and inflation and broader macroeconomic unpredictability and how we can set ourselves up for success. So that and it sounds like you're already kind of incorporating that, but that's my worry is like, are we feeling okay about the, 2-3 years down the line? Are we resilient in the event of some wacky random, whether it's a tariff or some other policy that leads to some economic instability?
To give you an idea, right now, our operating expenses match our operating revenue.
Yeah.
And so, and that's forecasted out the next 10 years. We'll show you that in a moment. But we're balanced completely on that side and also creating enough revenue, and roughly it's around, right now it's gonna be about $4 million, increasing to $8 to $12 million available for debt service, and still have an additional about $13 million a year available for capital. And so we actually have built a structure that provides a fairly good cushion so that if we do have some large economic hit, downturn, recession, whatever the case may be, we actually have a fair amount of cushion within there. We also maintain a 15% operating cushion just for bumps within the operating side, as well as a cash flow reserve of about 50% of our budget.
I appreciate that, thank
Yeah,
you.
so we do
And
have
I'm
a fair
looking at this
amount
for the first time right now, so
Sure,
I
absolutely.
appreciate that.
And then what you're seeing on the reduction there is really the reduction on the capital side, that's planned capital.
Thank you. All right. I'm okay.
Yeah, no, I'm actually
Great.
I was there.
It's a little warm here, though.
You guys need a break? You good?
No, it's
Keep
a
going?
little.
Nice.
I get it.
I know.
I thought it was my ask.
All right, on with the show. I'm Tracy Ryder. I'm joined tonight by Stephanie Holiday and Natalie Meridian will join us later for another part of the presentation. We're here to present the capital improvement program budget for fiscal year 26 and 27. And we're going to talk a little bit about the 10-year forecast as well. Okay, so Jeff and Olivia provided you a pretty comprehensive overview of staffing
and of the operating revenues and expenses. And one of those slides showed that about 1/3 of the expenses in the budget is capital, it's capital improvements. After operating costs, it makes up the second largest expenditure category in our budget. It's almost $50 million over the 2-year program. So it's a lot of money. It requires careful planning. And in a nutshell, the capital improvement program, or CIP, is that infrastructure investment plan. So later in the slideshow, Stephanie will speak more about how projects are selected for the program. And Natalie's going to speak about some specific large expenditure projects that we have programmed. But in general, a successful capital improvement program balances the needs of the community and the available resources that we have at the district in a deliberate, accountable, and achievable manner. We must prioritize projects that meet our critical needs. We have to ensure that those projects are funded within the adopted rate structure, and we have to deliver the projects within the timeline that we set forth to meet our goals. So I guess the question is, what are the goals? In fact, the goals haven't really changed much over the last several years. The projects change over time, but the goals kind of remain the same. Improve aging infrastructure. Many district assets have reached or are approaching the end of their life expectancy and require rehabilitation or replacement. Example given, our aging collection system, we've talked about the levels of inflow and infiltration in the system. And additionally, we have over 30 lift stations that push sewer up to a higher elevation before delivering it to the plant. All of these require replacement or rehab. Pictured here is New Bedford lift station. This project will be completed this summer, and it was a full-blown replacement. Another consideration is ensuring regulatory compliance. And we talk a lot how we operate in a heavily regulated industry. So sound, financially responsible CIPs have to include funding to meet current and future regulation. The nutrient watershed permit, for example, is going to require expensive capital expansion here at the plant, and trash capture requirements and electric fleet transitions are other unfunded mandates that the CIP must try to attempt to address. Creating resiliency means that we have resilient infrastructure that has built-in redundancies and backup plans. Those minimize service interruptions and reduce impacts that could be associated with climate change or regulatory mandates like energy consumption reductions. And last, we strive to have a system that has adequate capacity for responsible growth in the community driven by economic development. So these strategic investment goals are referred to as project drivers within the budget book, and they remain our primary focus in selecting projects for the program. I'm going to talk a little bit about the CIP funding over the last 3 years and over the next 3 years in terms of total source. So the first thing I want to point out about this chart is that tiny little light blue bar in the middle of each column. That represents our stormwater funding for capital. Residential stormwater rates have not increased in over 30 years. And after we remove operating costs, there's very little stormwater money available for capital expenditure. And I want to highlight that because it's going to be a challenge that we'll have to address. The second thing I want to point out is that you see that total CIP funding decreases after 2025, in moving into 2026 and 2027, and then starts to increase again. The reason for that is the MIPS project is completing. That's the Mare Island Pump Station project. It replaces our oldest asset at the plant. It's got $50 million in state revolving fund loans associated with it over 23, 24, 25, and 26. That's the majority of that magenta colored portion of the bar you see there. So when the MIPS project concludes, that $50 million SRF funding is going to come out of the capital budget, and the debt service will take its place in the operating budget and will no longer be reflected in CIP. So the overall total funding comes down, But even though the total funding column shrinks, we have the adopted rate structure in place, which is represented by the green portion of the column. So that continues to steadily rise, and we are heavily reliant upon that that sewer rate, user rate fee to pay for capital. The adopted rate structure is highlighted within the green rectangle, and we're in year 3 of that adopted rate structure. These rates are critical to maintain the funding necessary to support our capital program. There's some good news in this slideshow, and I want to brag a little bit on behalf of the team about how great the success was that we had over the last 2 years. The slide on the right shows the fiscal year 24 and 25 original budget in pink and actual expenditures in light blue. You can see that we were able to deliver 85% of our program capital budget. And that's not because we went crazy on change orders and overexpended. It's because we delivered 14 major projects, which are classified as over $500,000, and 24 projects total were delivered to benefit the ratepayers. I'm very proud to show you these statistics tonight, and this is an incredible result, and it's due to the hard work of everyone at the district. So I want to thank them. And there's also a downside in setting such a high bar for performance, right? We expect that to continue into the next 2-year budget, which is on the screen now. The program capital budget for CIP 26 and 27 is planned at just under $49 million in total, with fiscal year 26 getting over 26 million. 18 million of that comes from sewer rates, and another 6 million comes from that state revolving fund loan. Fiscal year 27 is almost 23 million, with 17 million coming from sewer rates. And over the 10-year long-range CIP, we anticipate spending close to $220 million in capital investment. Now, for some of the details on the plan, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Stephanie. You can hear from her.
Just an informative, we went to a presentation and did well with one, so we'll talk about. All right, so as Tracy mentioned, our CIP program has well-established goals. To develop the fiscal year 26 and 27 CIP, we wanted to balance the district priorities with our current conditions of our equipment and assets, as well as resources. So our projects are identified by using master plans for the treatment plant and our collection system, along with other planning documents like the ACF transition plan or electrification, asset management tools, and our CMMS system, or LEMBL. So for example, we have a lot of R&R projects, or rehab replacement projects that are needed. So we evaluate each of those projects for consequence of failure, safety, and public impact. Keeping in mind the district's strategic goals regarding infrastructure resiliency and regulatory compliance. The critical projects are then programmed first, with the remaining projects programmed based upon funding availability. So this evaluation process results in the development of well-organized capital plan that aligns with the district's goals and priorities. Funding is a major consideration, obviously, for capital project planning. The district's policy is to operate a pay-as-you-go or a pay-go CIP program, meaning expenses should not ever exceed available revenues. There are some exceptions, obviously, with the NIPS project, for instance, using a loan. But the CIP is comprised of 2 programs, your sewer program and your stormwater program. As you can tell from the pie chart on the screen, the sewer program is approximately 95% of the CIP budget over the next 2 years. Funds for each program come from 3 main sources: user fees, capacity fees, and other funding sources, which are grants, debt, loans. And also as shown is the upper lateral program, which is included as part of the sewer program in the budget, and a separate fee is collected for that. So project budgets are developed and then programmed by funding source. Some projects are allocated to both programs. For example, the vehicle and equipment replacement program, it is a grouped activity project, and so it has an allocation for both sewer and stormwater. Funding for the CIP is based on estimates of funds available for either storm or sewer water projects. The stormwater program is limited, as we see on the screen, and so tonight the major focus will be on our sewer program. So just a little bit about the documents themselves. Within the budget book are CIP budget spreadsheets. These include a lot of information beyond just your basic project number and name. Each project's budget is allocated by fiscal year and funding source, as well as the project driver being provided, which helps you connect the individual project to the overall program goals. The image on the screen is included in the budget book and offers a legend and primer to the document to help you understand the information that's presented. In some instances, activities are grouped into one line item to be managed more efficiently. And this was done last year for the first time with the vehicle and equipment replacement. And we've now included additional projects for major maintenance and plant building and grounds as well. So these budget spreadsheets are provided for these grouped projects as well to provide a breakdown for the smaller activities that are included within them. In addition to the budget spreadsheets, we also have project detail sheets for both the stormwater and sewer major projects. These are included within the appendix of the budget document, and they provide comprehensive information on the projects, the major projects, including total project budget, delivery schedules, project history and need, scope of work, and operational impact. This year, the project detail sheets were updated to include the strategic goal that they align with. So you can have an illustration of how these projects will connect to the overall district strategic plan. Right. So as mentioned, each of the CIP projects is assigned a primary project driver. For this 2-year CIP, the replacement or rehabilitation is the primary driver or the bulk of the CIP. I'm gonna get up and let Natalie come and talk to you about the individual projects within each of those sections.
And Natalie's our associate engineer, and she's also led the next project for design and construction. Amazing job.
Thank you. Excuse me. So I have to apologize. I'm still fighting a cough from 4 weeks ago. So that's, I have my water bottle here just in case.
Join the club.
So Tracy and Stephanie talked about high level, what goes into the CIP and how it gets developed, but I get the fun part. I get to talk about examples of projects within each one of those project drivers. As Stephanie mentioned, rehabilitation and replacement projects make up the majority of our projects within the CIP, and a bulk of that is within our wastewater treatment plant. This figure shows the facilities within the wastewater treatment plant color-coded by age, with the oldest facilities shown in red. The biggest chunk of money is going to be spent on our oldest facility, our old outfall pump station, as we're currently in construction on the MIPS project. The next largest chunk of money is going to be spent in our secondary treatment system, where we're going to be improving our electrical system, rehabilitating a clarifier, and doing some odor control work. In addition to aging infrastructure in our treatment plant, we also have aging infrastructure in our collection system. Many of the pipes in our collection system are old, and old pipes are at a higher risk for inflow and infiltration, or I&I for short. And this can reduce capacity. So we've done a lot of studies looking at I&I in different neighborhoods to identify the highest producers of I&I, and we're focusing our rehab projects in those specific areas. We're also prioritizing projects that reduce I&I that are within the Sears Point sewer basin. The figure on the right shows pipes within the Sears Point sewer basin that are highlighted in blue. So this represents about 1/3 of the district and is a large area. This area also has large proposed developments. So we want to make sure we're continuing to reduce I&I in these areas. An example of that is in our 2025 sewer rehab project, which is located in the Meadows area, which is just shown in the area in the little box in pink. So this area both it's one of our highest producers of I&I, and it's also in the Sears Point sewer shed, so we're checking 2 boxes there. In addition to reducing I&I in our collection system, we're also looking at improving capacity in our collection system. So we're evaluating and modeling our system to better program our capacity budget so we can facilitate responsible growth and development within the city. Climate resiliency is another project driver, and this is an example. This is our work on Tubbs Island. The district owns and uses Tubbs Island, as you guys are aware, to land apply our biosolids, which is a beneficial use that recycles 100% of our biosolids and saves district ratepayers over $1 million a year. Tubbs Island is protected on 3 sides by levees. So as climate patterns evolve, it's important that these levees be repaired and improved so we can protect this use. So the district is working on a levee improvement program so the levees can withstand tides, wave action, flood events, and so we can also respond to emergencies if they should occur. The last project driver is regulatory requirements. And so we've mentioned before nutrient removal, and so I wanted to use that as our example for this regulatory project. The district, along with other Bay Area sewer agencies, is being required to remove nitrogen from its wastewater effluent by 2034. To do so, we're going to need to design and construct large new infrastructure. In this proposed 2-year CIP includes budget for the planning work. So we're looking at cost-effective and creative strategies for the infrastructure layout, the size of the infrastructure, where we're going to put that infrastructure, different innovative treatment processes, and financing strategies. However, over the next 8 years of the 10-year CIP, there's going to be a significant increase in spending to accommodate design and construction. Because this is such a long-term project, it's a good segue to talk about our 10-year CIP. So I'll just provide some high-level examples. Many of the projects in our 2-year CIP are carried through in our 10-year CIP. So that includes the nutrient removal that we just talked about. We're going to continue replacing our aging infrastructure in the wastewater treatment plant, and we anticipate significant electrical upgrades to accommodate both the nutrient removal project as well as other increases in energy demands. And lastly, we're going to continue replacing aging infrastructure in our collection system. Now, this is a it's kind of a living document. So every time we update our 2-year CIP, we're also updating our 10-year CIP. And this allows it to be a flexible document and accommodate shifts in priorities. One of the major challenges in developing a CIP is balancing these competing priorities. As new regulations are enacted, they require new and expensive infrastructure. For example, we've talked about the nutrient removal project. Tracy also mentioned the electrification of the district's fleet, and we see a potential for treating PFAS or forever chemicals. These regulatory-driven projects are unfunded mandates that they don't come with grants. So as we're directing more and more budget to the expensive infrastructure needed to meet these regulations, that leaves us with less budget for other project drivers like aging infrastructure replacement. An example of how this might play out is in our collection system. We have over 370 miles of pipe in our sewer system, and we replace on average about 1 mile of pipe per year. Although the amount we've been replacing over the past 5 years is increasing, and we're carrying that increase into the next 10-year CIP, it's not going to be enough. We're not going to be able to replace our sewer pipes within their useful service life. So we have to figure out how to maintain that balance between meeting these regulations that require large expensive infrastructure and maintaining our existing infrastructure. The other piece of this balancing act is making sure we're maintaining affordable rates. So to carry my collection system example through, we could just say, let's replace a lot more sewer pipe per year, and that would meet our goal of aging infrastructure replacement. But if we don't change anything else, our CIP budget will significantly increase, which could mean an increase in sewer rates. So we want to avoid that. So to help us perform this balancing act, we're evaluating various solutions, including new and innovative technologies, changing our rehabilitation methods, and evaluating different options for financing. So that's the end of our CIP presentation. And at this point, we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you. All right, questions? Go ahead, Trustee McCullough.
So a general question, over this 2-year CIP plan or program, how much capacity have you increased from where we are in the next over the next 2 years?
You're asking about sewer capacity?
Both SS and SW.
Oh, it's stormwater too.
Yeah.
Do you know the number? It's not a lot, and there's a reason for that. And I'll explain the reason.
Yes.
The modeling that we have didn't take into account the development that's coming into the system. There's significant development happening in the system in the terms of residential and potentially a large casino project and other projects that are taking place in the development areas. So we've restructured our models to evaluate the inflow of this new development on the system and where there's gonna be overflows potentially, or where there are bottlenecks in the system. The other part of that is we've begun to do this rehabilitation program in the Sears Point system. What rehabilitation does is it reduces the amount of inflow and infiltration in the system, thus regaining lost capacity. So we need to account for that in the model too. How much system capacity are we regaining by replacing old pipe with new pipe? And how much system capacity do we need to produce to serve as new developments? So we're modeling these activities as they come in with development projects, and we're gonna have to program those projects kind of on the fly. If we know that we're gonna build this casino and it does X, Y, and Z to the collection system, we're gonna have to program those projects to be completed before that project comes online. So it's a flexible system. We have some money in capacity that we can add, and we can do that through a mid-year budget adjustment to make those necessary improvements. So we want to be sure we're programming the right areas, but we have a plan to address that.
So I guess that brings in my question. So I've been a planning commission for over 7.5 years. And so whenever a planning potential project even comes, that's coming from a VFWD to see if you have capacity. And what I'm recently hearing, more so in the past year or so, is the fact that there is no capacity for economic development for projects to come in. And I'm trying to figure out where do we get beyond that to where we're actually designing and building in the capacity, not for the next 2 years, but for the next 5, because my layman's brain says that it's cheaper to build stuff now than what's gonna be in 10 years. So why? So I'm trying to understand what is the holdup of why aren't we building for capacity now and having to wait till, because I'm hearing all of this and it sounds like we're all the CIP is for the status quo.
Well, I hope that's not all you heard. We're also.
Well, that's where this numbers are, in other words, I didn't hear anything about we're improving capacity 50%, we're improving capacity 75%. To where, and we're, once again, understand, we're coming from an economic development, not only from the Vallejo flood and wastewater, but from a city standpoint. And we are getting bombarded with, we can't do economic development because of X, Y, and Z. And one of those components is VFWD. So I want to get past why are we pointing the finger at VFWD, and to understand where are we from VFWD standpoint moving forward to the future projection. You obviously know the casino, so you understand that's a big capacity number that you have to take into account. So
Yes.
I'm understanding where are these other, because it's a cumulative of this small project here, this small project here, it's all gonna be a cumulative at some point.
So I completely respect your question, and I understand the dilemma that poses. And we are addressing that dilemma and planning effectively through the modeling for each project. But from another standpoint is that every developer that comes in is always gonna build their project next week.
Sure.
They're always right on the verge of building this, and we're gonna break ground, and we're gonna do this. And years go by and nothing happens. And we can't go out and build projects for every developer that says they're going to build something and then not have it come through, because there's limited dollars to do that. So we have to, one, leverage the need of the development in a way where we partner with them to achieve the capacity that's required prior to them needing it. And we do that through modeling and effective planning. And we can adjust the CIP through mid-year adjustments as required to serve those projects. But there's never been a project that we've said, you can't build this because we don't have capacity for it in my tenure.
Well, I'm just running into the Connolly corridor right now.
Well, Connolly corridor was brought up, but we don't have a project before us to comment on. We sent a letter that said, you have to reduce inflow and infiltration in order to move forward with development, but we don't have a project plan to comment on specifically. So we're not holding up.
I've seen your comments on the plan, so somebody here made comments on the plan. Gillian showed me the plan where somebody at wastewater flagged it and put comments in that there's not capacity, so somebody is not on the same page, and I think we're all kind of feeling it now, where we need to talk about this.
So isn't it true, I have a question, just that when we talk about projecting out to the future. How is it, if you're building these beautiful projects, and we're putting in a lot of dollars, but the real question goes when I think about a whole sewer water system and the cost of it and how far it runs, where is the collaboration? And I'm not talking about any particular project, to be very frank, but where is the collaboration between this entity and the city in terms of planning to determine what should it look like in 10 years? Not just project by project, and it may not be just a question for this agency, right? But a question for all of us when we think about what does the future of Vallejo look like? Because it costs a lot of money when you lay pipes and you come back along, I'm sure we all can agree, and you come and start tearing up streets again and on and on and on. And so that all of this conversation goes into how we're using our land and what is it permitted for and on and on and on. So where do we really see ourselves as a city from a very future perspective, coming together, the different entities needed to really think about the future of the city and how we maximize every dollar on each side? This is where, from a leadership perspective, we have to start thinking different to when we talk about modeling. Modeling isn't, this predictive modeling looks at what is the future state of something, not just one piece of it. We have to look at our entire city and say, what is the future state of our city and how do we really begin to engage in those conversations? And yeah, this board is really wonky. Let's just be honest about it, because we sit on the city side, the county side. But the reality is we should have a holistic interest in the future of our city and how do we do it, maximize the dollars, and where do those points really come, and leadership to bring us forward in that way. And I think it would make a difference about the economic development of the city holistically, and that impacts your revenue, that impacts the city revenue, that impacts how businesses come in, what kinds of businesses can come in, how we're building future homes, where transportation is going to be laid. And so I just think we all as leaders need to begin to really think about how do we have some more integrated dialogue, even though we're convergent, but where are we divergent? And that's what I'm hearing here more than it's not about a project. It's where are we divergent to be this futuristic city and really have a plan and lay down the infrastructure in a way that really serves us well from a dollar perspective and a build-out perspective.
That's a great point, and I think we all have to work towards that and figuring out how to kind of figure out that long-term strategy overall. And certainly, yeah, we'd love to be part of that, because it's, as projects come through it, most of them are long-term, but it is a built-out system. And then as new projects come in, like Blue Rock Springs or the casino, not on any plan, but as they come in, it's trying to plan for those and how to deal with those. But I agree with you, it's like, yeah, trying to really look to the future of how we can make this work together and what industries work best, because you're right, a water intensive industry would may be very difficult. But if that's what wants to happen, we really have to figure things out.
And I think that speaks to, that's all, I'm sorry.
No, I would say, let you
Because
finish.
I think that speaks to the big part. I wasn't trying to point the finger of VFWD or what, it's to trustee Lenajue's point of, if we need to have these conversations, if the city needs to get more involved with it, if VFWD, does it Mare Island? Is it the developers? Because at some point, the development agreement is gonna speak to and start needing that conversation of whether it's gonna be a CFD, EIFD, or what other the funding sources to get this infrastructure. The point is, we're not getting the infrastructure in there to build up the capacity, and I wanna get past that point of, how do we get to that point?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Mare Island aside, that's the discussion we're gonna have, I think, together and come to some consensus on. But our development team works very well with the city and we have built that relationship. And we're getting involved in that entitlement process and that general plan process and that land use process at the core level where these decisions are made. And we advocate participating in that. And we want to, and we're trying to build our internal team that also cares about that, to Trustee Lenajue's point earlier. It's more important for district staff in those areas than it is for consulting staff. Like, we want internal people making these decisions and growing along with the city's plan for growth, so they understand the background and the history that is important as these things develop. One of the issues that's come up with the county is the updating of the plan on Benicia Road. They wanna make more intense development there. That's a general plan and land use development, and we're participating with that program. So these are great things that we can certainly improve on at the district, and I look forward to doing that.
And because the point that we make is, you are the only business in this whole area that designs stormwater.
Yes.
And all this stuff. So we look to you as to, if we need capacity, you're the leader to tell us what do we need.
Yes.
And this is where, once you give us that guidance and direction, then we can have those conversations with Mare Island, with the city, with our planning department, and go from there. But it's until we have understanding of what is that capacity we're trying to design to, that's where we're waiting for someone to lead us in that, and that is your expertise.
Yes, sir.
I would add,
I was just gonna add, yeah, I mean, my concerns with the plan as you go is that, are you nimble enough to make changes if developments happen, like, or developments having to wait 2 years because we're not nimble enough at the district to be able to take on that capacity when they finally pull the trigger and they get through all the hoops. I mean, the nightmare of the hoops of the city and getting through all the planning and all of those stages. And if they're ready to start digging, are you nimble enough with your planning to be able to add that capacity, or is that just another delay in a project?
That's a good question, and we're looking into those from a holistic perspective with the modeling, with the planning, with the land use patterns, with the prospective developments on the horizon. But also, capacity constraints are a little bit confusing too, in that we're restricted in wet weather capacity more so than in average daily flow. So it's a balancing act, right? Some storms, we're on the verge of obtaining a regulatory fine if we spill. But during a normal day, we're only flowing 8 million gallons and we're permitted for 15. So it's a balancing act that we have to consider with each development. And that is not the holistic response, but that is the actual response when it comes to the individual projects.
And that's true, and I don't think it's I don't think it's this entity's dialogue alone. I just have to say that, because I don't want you to feel that way, because I hear you and I get that and I understand that. And I just am having to sit up here for a very important reason, because we have this triangle, right? We have our wastewater entity, we have our county, we have our city. And the real question for us, frankly, the real question for us is, how do we all get in a room and really begin to think strategically and from a systems lens perspective that says, this is what our future is for this city and how we achieve that. And it really does take all three of our pieces of government to have that. It's not all of this agency to own. We just happen to be sitting here today having the conversation because you're presenting, and CIP is really important from many directions. And so I just want us to be mindful of that. It's not all yours to own, and it's hard to have the fullness of the dialogue because we're holding these different roles, trying to hold them in a perfect way, right? But again, I challenge us, I challenge our mayor, I challenge our supervisor, I challenge, our director, our city manager, and on and on and on. How do we really do this? And it really is about land use. And it's about what is our vision for this city as it relates to building it out holistically. Because dollars are limited. And we've got to figure that out to maximize every dollar that we have and to bring in what we need to be successful.
I was gonna add just quickly one thing and then I'll kick it over to Trustee James. I'm going through right now the budget process for like 5 different agencies. And over the past few months, I've been thinking, each agency is doing capital improvement projects. And they're doing capital improvement projects in the city of Vallejo. And you've got, the city doing its capital improvement plan, DFWD doing one, you got GDRD doing one, the school district, STA. And at some point, I think we do need, and I think the leadership should and has to come from the city. So that's on, us. We have to have an overarching vision for the future of our city so that all of these capital improvement plans can fold in and nest together and fit in with each other. And then also, my request to you and of myself for you is that we create that vision, because for us as elected officials, we're not responsible for getting in the weeds and doing the work. We're responsible for the guidance and the leadership, and we do have limited resources. So when we're in conversations with state and federal officials and we're talking about where we might be able to get funding, we need to have that vision so we can figure out where the bottlenecks are and where the pain points are. And I mean, especially with Congressman Garamendi, when I'm in conversations, I have to think about all these different agencies and figure out where do we advocate for resources that will then create that flow for everybody else. And I think there are some cases where it's gonna be via VFWD. And so I hope that through this process, we can get that overarching vision, since the city is the one kind of setting the general plan for the area minus the unincorporated areas. And then my request of VFWD will be like, what are your next kind of wish lists? Or like, where are you feeling crushed? Where do you feel like if we could inject some capital, it would be, it would be most impactful. And there's a version of that right now happening at the county, which is the county's redoing its general plan. We have a, large scale landowner we're dealing with in a certain part of the county, but the 7 cities are looking to the county for leadership on the general plan, and the county's looking to fold us all in, so we're all in alignment. So this is just, it's a very good time for us to be doing all this work, and I think especially with capital projects, like as you're doing those 5 and 10-year plans, like those have got to lock in together. Because if STA is doing a big thing on Snow Boulevard and VFWD's out in East Vallejo and the city's focused on Bear Island, it's like, what are we doing? So that's my vision, and I think that's our responsibility, frankly, as a group. So I'm gonna go to Trustee James, and then we'll keep. Were you already up from earlier?
I've been doing all the speaking, my bad.
That's fine, go ahead.
Oh my gosh, well, I have a comment for the end of the meeting on that, but, okay, why don't we
No, continue.
do we wanna just go this way and hook around?
Sure.
Yeah, so go ahead, if that's okay.
So I have kind of long-term issues of, I don't see anywhere in the plan, maybe I missed it, but like, have you looked at the sea level rising and your seawall? And I know we're like 6 feet above the water here, so where is that in your plan for the future? Is that not in the plan?
No, no, it's not in the plan for a seawall around the plant. Yes, it is in the plan to deliberately address areas where sea level rise is most impactful. For one, the Tubbs Island levy program. That's a resource that we have to protect because it's our main source of solids handling process with the 100% beneficial reuse program. So that's one area where we're focusing dollars, and we've got, what, $10 million, $7.5 million program over? $7.5 million programmed over 10 years to make sure those levies are effective at maintaining that resource for us.
One thing I would add is that as we're designing new infrastructure in the plant, we're accounting for sea level rise, and so we're raising the elevations of decks and electrical systems. So that is being considered.
Okay, that's what we do. The second thing is, this odor issue, and I know that the public, I think, is all left but here, so am I. Are you setting aside something for Plan B? Because I can tell you if the smells aren't gone after this project is done in July, we're not gonna wait another 2 years for another project. So do you have set aside for a Plan B for the odors if this construction project and this new filtration system doesn't work?
No, we don't. I think the best place to start is to get the systems back running that were running when they were originally implemented, right? And then the monitoring system that we plan to engage with, EnviroSuite is the name of the company, that gets the monitoring devices and the weather station and the baseline values, that will give us real data on, is this odor problem originating from the plant? And what is the odor problem? And how does weather affect it? And then we can come up with a strategy on that. And we can certainly put more dollars into odor control analysis. You know, we don't have a backup plan for odor control.
I personally, I don't think that's good enough. I think that we need to have some kind of funding for that. I think that, I don't know if any of you live in this neighborhood, but it is awful here. You know, just for a day, shut off your air ventilation and start sucking in your own plant air into this building and sit here all day. And you'll see what the residents deal with every single day. And I hear from residents all day long about the smells of the sewer plant. You can even smell it when you're coming in on the ferry, when you're passing the sewer plant. So if the odor is not fixed, we're gonna have, you know, torches and pitchforks here, because people are not gonna live in this town smelling like a sewer plant. And we can make all the justifications we want, but if the smell is not fixed by the end of the summer with this project, we have a major issue that we're gonna have to deal with. And so that we need to make sure that there is some type of funding set aside for a Plan B in case the issue doesn't get fixed. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but those calls just come every single day. So, you know, it's one thing when you work and then you go home somewhere else, and when you live here, you breathe that all day long, it's awful. So that, I definitely want to see something in the budget for a Plan B, just in case. And then I think, along the same lines, I think, you know, we're gonna have to figure out, we've talked at length, I don't want to keep talking about Mare Island. I think we need to have, there's gonna have to be some compromises between the city and the district and Mare Island. We can't not have the development happen because we don't have the sewer system in place. They can't afford to develop until they have, if they have to build the sewer system, they'll never develop. So we're gonna have to compromise on some of that. And so I think that we need to build something both on the city side as well as on this side, as at least to get that project moving so that we can at least get some development happening there. So I think those are things that the two things for sure that I want to see in this budget before it comes back is a contingency, a small contingency for Mare Island, and also a Plan B for the owners.
Yes, and there are funding mechanisms in this 2-year budget to address infrastructure on Mare Island, including the potential to acquire a $3 million grant to address inflow and infiltration on the island. There's our share, which is a portion of the $3 million, and we're spending over $1.5 million rehabilitating 2 of the lift stations on Mare Island, which need new pumps and electrical modifications. So there is work going on out there. in terms of that. Thank you for those recommendations.
Trustee James?
Mine is more or less what we already talked about, like the overlapping work that's happening at the county level, the city, and like within this district, and even with our county's water agency, like with the news of the Delta plant and how that may impact our district. So I know that there's like climate resiliency work and sea level rise work that is happening between like the county and some of the cities, and wanting to ensure that our district is involved in those conversations, because we don't want to have wasted dollars. We don't have a lot of that, and they're doing that study now. And our district wasn't included in that when I was given a presentation in a different meeting. So I just want to make sure to uplift that. And then with all the development and projects that are coming up, from the Costco to the potential casino, Blue Rock, we will have to talk about the elephant in the room one day, which is the fairgrounds. So, and I know there's been a lot of attention on Bear Island and the Colony corridor. However, there are, I will say, economically low income families that are living behind the fairgrounds that year after year are flooded out due to the rain and the drainage there. I don't know what it's called, the technical terms, canal, or the pipes or whatever. Yes, sorry, I'm like, I don't know the technical term. But I know that because of those projects, it funnels through that area and tends to impact those folks over there. So we would have to talk about what that would look like. And again, it would be great to see, and we're having this high level conversation, but I would like for us to really talk about what would it look like next steps. So is that we appoint somebody from this board, appoint somebody from the county to really have this conversation? When will we be having this conversation? Because there are all these projects that are being fast tracked right now. So is that 2 months? Is that 3 months? And I understand we have to have this futuristic view of projects, but like, how are we planning for that right now? So that's just the comments that I wanna, have there.
All right, I'm gonna continue us around. Did you already go? Okay.
No, I have not done, but I'll pass.
Okay. Trustee Lynn, did you get everything you wanted to say, or do you have anything else? Trustee Gordon, you have anything? All right.
You guys heard me.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah, we appreciate it.
Thank you for your report.
So close.
So,
This next section is actually very important. There's one more section. One more section, and it's just on the 10-year, what does this look like on the bottom line? So, to get to that point, looking at debt. So, Stephanie talked about how we're predominantly a pay-as-you-go plan or makeup. We have our existing debt right now is that bottom burnt orange kind of color, which is our, the refunding that we did at the beginning of 2024, which really refunded some stuff that we've done back to the late 90s. So that's it's a fairly low number right now, around 2 million a year, and that ends in 2034. The yellow bar, which is on top of that, is the Mare Island pump station project, and to be very clear, that project is not on Mare Island. We all know that is a pump station driven plant that discharges to the street. That project is about $1.8 million a year in debt service and will continue for the next 30 years. And so that's really a stable expense in the future. The big anticipated one is that pink bar there, and that's really the anticipated new capital project around nutrient removal. The exact funding of how that's going to be done, we don't know yet. We don't know if that's going to be available. We don't even know if SRF money is going to be available at this point, let alone whether we qualify for it. We don't know if the WIFIA program is around, which is an EPA funded program. Looks like currently it is going to be available. But if SRF goes away, then it's going to be an oversubscribed program. We don't know if we're going to have to then necessarily go to the bond market and issue debt on the bond market in order to pay for this. And at this point, we don't know whether those bonds, if we go to the bond market, are going to be taxable or tax exempt based upon proposals before the Congress right now on removing the tax availability of municipal bonds. So there's huge unknowns right now in terms of that. Thankfully, we don't have to make that decision for about 2 years. So we're in a fairly good place knowing that we have this large debt that's coming, but we don't have to make the decision right now of how we're going to finance for it. We have anticipated a very conservative assumption here, which is around a 6.5% annual interest rate. Now, to put that in perspective, if we were to go to the market right now on tax-free bonds, that would be around 3.6, 3.7%. So it's a very conservative number that we put into the budget because this is a project that we cannot afford to fail. There has to be enough money available in order to make the debt service to make that project work. And so we're very conservative to that end. Now, to the extent that we don't need 6.5%, but instead we can bring it down to something around 4.5%, something in that range. All that additional debt money that we've assumed in our long-term plan would be available for capital projects in the future, so we can start putting them into more I&I projects, more capital projects, addressing some of the things you've all been talking about and concerned about. So I just want you to know that there is a hedge built into that number, but the bulk of that comes in 2031, 2032. And so we can't really take advantage of that right now. It's sort of a wait and see where we are a number of years from now. So just to give you an idea, but either way, the amount of debt service we're expecting is still going to be somewhere in that $6 to $8 million a year range, which is at least double, if not triple, our current expense debt service. It is a substantial project for us. And that's why we've had to do the rate increases that we've had in order to get us to the point that we'll actually be able to start making debt service payments and not have low rate, and then a huge rate to households in the community to then start paying debt service for years. We've had to ramp up those rates in anticipation of that debt service coming into the future. So just give you an idea of where we are projecting debt at this point. So this slide takes a moment for me to set up and explain. This is not spending, this is not revenues. This is what we call funded equity. You might think of it as an empty cash position. In city parlance, you might hear fund balance. We don't have fund balance here. It's a term that doesn't exist in proprietary funds, but regardless, think of it that way. It's the amount of cash that you have available within your fund to spend on non-dedicated, non-reserved things, right? So this is any cash position in our wastewater fund. So it's our largest fund, it's the most significant spending that we do. That's the orange bar. And so it's roughly from 30 million to between 30 and $35 million right now. It's going to go up, eventually hit around 50 million at the end of the 10-year period. Now, the green line that's on here is our reserve target. So just to remember back to January, our conversation around reserves is we have 3 reserves. We have 1 reserve that we keep for cash flow. So that's the biggest reserve because we get all of our revenue, most of our revenue, 90+% of it on property taxes. And so that only comes in twice a year, December and April. And so we have to make sure that we have enough cash in the bank on July 1 to pay for all of our expenses from July 1 to December 31st. So we've got to have 6 months worth of operating expenses in the bank, plus 6 months worth of capital, and we're spending capital money before we get any money from the county. So we have to have, so that cash flow drops down to almost nothing by December. So it's a real thing. On top of that, we have a reserve, which is about 4.5 million, which we keep for emergencies. We had an earthquake. We have to spend money really quickly to get our system up and running until we can eventually figure out how to get FEMA money or pay it back or get a short-term loan or whatever we need to do. That's the quick money in the bank, because as you know, if we have an earthquake, it's going to be like in August or September when we don't have the cash, right? So we have to have that money set aside separately. The third reserve we have is debt service. And so we're required under our SRF loans to maintain an amount of cash in our bank that could be, and it's equal to 1 year's worth of debt service. More technical than that, but that's roughly the idea. And you have to have that much. So we're assuming that when we issue the new debt, that we'll have a cash reserve. We'll have to have a cash reserve set aside for that as well. If we go to the bond market, that's not a requirement. Right now, because we're AA bonded, AA rated bond holder, if we maintain that level of rating, we would not need to do a debt reserve. We don't have a debt reserve on our existing refunding that we did, and probably will not need one in the future. So that would be additional money that we wouldn't have to set aside. So that green bar could come down. But again, we're maintaining conservatively that we might have to have a debt reserve. And so so the amount of reserve we have to keep will go up when we issue debt. That's what's happening there and why that green bar goes up. So what you're seeing in this chart is that as the next 10 years goes along, that revenues and expenses, counting capital, debt service, all of our expenses, we're matching. That the amount of cash we have left over is matching the amount of money we need to have within our debt reserve. The only year that we're really significantly off is 2031, and that's just the first year in which we have a bunch of cash coming in because of original debt, but we don't have the debt service payment until the next year. It's just a timing issue. We'll get back to that, and then we're back to our projection again. So that's the wastewater fund. It actually shows that the plan we developed 2 years ago is on track, that we still are proposed, that we look at same sort of cost of living kinds of stuff, assuming an operation, looking at the capital plan that the capital team presented, we have the resources to implement that. That's what that's showing. That's on the wastewater side. You know I'm setting you up. On the stormwater side, it's not quite the same story, same kind of track. Now, scale, remember, scale back here, we're talking $30 to $50 million. We're talking a scale of $6 million here of cash. This is all the cash we have in the bank for the stormwater program. Starting in 2027 or early 2028, we will be spending more in operating than we receive in for revenue. Now, right now, we still have a little bit more that we receive in, and that little bit can kind of go into capital, and you can see that we have sort of that up right above the $6 million mark. But over time, you can see the amount of cash we have goes down as we start spending our fund balances on operating expenses. This is completely unsustainable. We have 8 to 10 years to resolve this problem, assuming that nothing goes wrong. And the things that go wrong are sewers, storm drains that collapse and collapse the road. We will be responsible for rebuilding that and rebuilding the road. That can wipe out that $4 million cushion easily, right? So we are 1 or 2 disasters away from having zero money in this fund. So as you know, we went to the community and asked for increases of the rates over a 5-year period, started at 2022. That did not pass. It did not pass. I think we got a 36% yes vote. We will need as a board to try to bring this back to you with multiple solutions on how to start addressing this problem. This is not an easy fix. This is part of a strategic plan to bring this to you. Adopting the budget right now, we are still balanced for the next 2 years in the sense that our revenues match our expenses. So we're not outside of policy compliance, but the projection is not good. So I just want to bring that to your attention now that the budget we have right now is balanced, but it will not be balanced if we maintain our current path. I have no good news. That's just
And that takes how much of a vote in order to have that pass?
It requires 50% plus 1 for property owners. If we did not do a property owner vote, so that's one path is property owners. So, the city gets to vote, the school district gets to vote, the large car lot is 1 vote, the individual postage stamp lot is 1 vote, right? It's not based on size or anything. 1 parcel, 1 vote. The other option is to go to a population vote. That would require 2/3 approval to do a that would be considered a special tax under the state laws.
And the last attempt, was that a property owner vote?
That was a property owner, right? So I was trying to get the 50% vote.
Okay.
We had fairly good turnout on that one. Relatively turnout, it's like 18 or 20% turnout, which for a special vote, which is not during like a presidential election, I think it was just you mail something out, they mail it back. It was actually a fairly high return. So that's something that is on our list of things to do. We're presenting the budget to you in a way that is sustainable during the budget period, but we have to resolve this within the next 2 years. Or at least how we plan to resolve it. I'm sorry, I'm really down now.
Yeah, I actually had a really nice job.
Yeah.
Great. Next steps.
Next steps, so we've got about 10 more slides, so. I just want to acknowledge Jennifer Harrington and Justin Guino back there that stuck it out with us and thank you for your support. But yeah, next steps is bring the budget back in June of 2020, next month, and have a public hearing, adopt the budget with your approval, and then continue to monitor the inflation and the financial impacts on this budget for the next 2 years. So thank you.
Really appreciate the input you gave us. Things to think about.
Scott, the slide, please. Run it down. Thank you.
Yes, I was just gonna add that I really appreciate the conservative bond projection, it gets to, you read my mind from my comment earlier about the federal unpredictability, and you also read my mind in terms of we need to solve this stormwater fund issue. And so what's the timeline you think on that? You had said, I mean, you said you'll bring it back kind of in this year, like, we're gonna start to try to get some
No,
options.
6 to 9 months, we probably need a little bit of time, we need to get through this fight, we need to get through this budget.
Right.
It's a small breather,
Yeah.
and start developing the plans and options to bring to you. And
So
it's gonna
we
be a-
did that in this next like calendar.
It'll be a
year.
conversation, and it'll be several meetings, we'll have preliminary ideas, you'll give us your comments and thoughts and direction. We'll go back, develop more specific plans and the things that make sense to you, and do kind of an iterative process, probably, I suspect it'll take about a year. And the idea is to use, since we do 2-year budgeting, is to
Yeah.
use the off budget year, this time of year, to really focus on that instead.
Okay. So what I think we should do, I know we've given our thoughts. Now, do you want to just do a quick whip around if anybody has any other direction they want to give on things we want to see in the June that we haven't already said? Anybody have anything to raise? I'm okay, I just want to make sure we have one more option. All right, thank you very much. Were there any members of the public wanting to comment on this item? I don't see any here, but I just figured I should say that. All right, with that, we will close the item. Thank you.
Yeah, we just want to thank you guys for your leadership too and your engagement during this process.
Thank you for your time.
Challenging and very exciting for us.
Yeah. We appreciate it. Okay, that is, I believe, gonna bring us to the general manager's report. So,
Thank
General
you.
Manager Chanko, I know we put you on the spot earlier about the odor.
Yeah,
Anything
thank
else to report?
Yeah, so the finance department received the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, Triple Crown Award for the 3rd consecutive year. This prestigious award recognizes VFWD's outstanding achievements in government budgeting, accounting, and finance reporting. Earning this significant accomplishment reflects the hard work, dedication, and professionalism of our staff. And I want to thank the staff for putting together the budget, especially Olivia, who did a ton of work on this, so,
Yeah.
so thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pat.
April was a no sewer spill month for the district, and as we're gonna bring back the EUM to the next meeting, in it, it shows on one of the items, it basically shows that the district 5-year trend is 90% lower than statewide average. It's amazing, we're 90% lower as far as spills in our system than statewide, so it's amazing, and testing keeping us up. The repairs for the Sears Point Force Main have been completed, that's why we don't have to do the emergency action tonight, they're done, so Tracy and Natalie. And then just recognizing some employees, we had a 4-way tie for Employee of the Year, we all said how we'd vote on it, and it ended up being a tie. Included Bill Ashton Technical Services, Jasmine Herber in Finance Business Services, Jared Hope in Maintenance, and Jason DiMartini, who is our longest tenured employee, started at the district in June 2000. And the remarkable fact about Jason is that he works every day with like the same enthusiasm he had when he first started at the district. He's just like a go-getter, just always wants to go get it, which is, you know, someone that's been here for a long time, kind of, he's just always a go-getter, so we certainly appreciate it. And that's the end of my report. He's in Fox, field operations. He's the one that if there's a problem at your house, he'll be there. Like you'll see him, as Justin always tells the story, you always watch him and almost say, he's like, I gotta go, and he just runs out, he's like, I gotta get there.
Well, thank you, we appreciate that, and that'll bring us, we already did the community forum, item 9 is reports by presiding officers and trustees. Anybody have anything to report, trustee Matias?
Less a report, more of a request, so at next month's meeting, item 4J, the update on Mare Island, I would like for you guys to consider putting that under administrative items.
Yeah.
And add that I would like to provide direction to staff in addition to discussing Mare Island. Thank you.
Anything else? Other comments? All right, I have a quick comment, which is just, on my end, I mean, I was struggling a little today. I think we're still getting the hang of this new environment, and so I actually really like the informality and the closeness in the audience, but we definitely have to tighten our parliamentary procedure a little bit, and so I will ask us at the next meeting. We have a tendency to kind of all jump in, and it makes it hard for me to track who has spoken and who's going, and then members of the audience are jumping in, and so, I'll meet with the general manager and figure out exactly. I don't wanna be overly formal, but I also want our meetings to run smoothly and fairly, so I'll just ask. I really like the looping.
Trustee Levisure, then just break down.
Or we can rotate around who goes first, but do a looping mechanism and keep the advantages of the environment, because it's nice that being all here and not at the dais, but also kind of reserve our temptations to just all jump in, for the sake of our productivity. So I'll take that on. And with that, we will adjourn. We made it just before 9.
Can we keep that?
Yes.